Just need to get my.
Good evening. Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of November 10th, 2025. This meeting is now coming to order. Mr. Franciac, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Fantini. Here. Mr. Young. Here. Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Seebeck.
Here.
Thank you.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, I have a couple of announcements for the good of the order. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, and the city facilities will be closed in recognition of that, and there will also be no garbage service tomorrow. And waste management will follow the normal schedule by picking up on Wednesday for Tuesday and Wednesday. On Wednesday, November 12th, there's a Skagit Valley Tourism Workshop, which the community is invited to participate in, with discussions about the future of cultural tourism in Skagit Valley, helping support artisans, makers, and creative spaces. And this event will take place at Buxton's from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And for more information and to register, you may visit the State of Washington Tourism page at industry.stateofwatourism.com. That is it for me. And then we will move on to committee reports. First up being the Port City Liaison Committee.
Councilmember Moulton.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem. We did have a Port City meeting on November 4th. We discussed a little bit about the desire for a small boat center near kind of Rotary Park when you're heading out, and also next near the marina. There's a kind of a triangle with some difficult boundary lines that are confusing. But there is a group that is interested in kind of working through that process. And we just had a quick discussion about the fact that the city and the port are willing to continue that discussion with the interested group and see where that can go. Then we talked a little bit about the event facility did come to the action item did come to the port commissioners on November 6th. And I believe that passed with support. Just as a point of interest, if anyone wants to watch that meeting, that will then come to us in the near future.
Thank you. Any questions from council about that meeting? Okay, moving on to. Yes,
I
Mr.
did have a
Walters.
couple of add-ons to the report. One of which is that we expect the fireworks this year to cost quite a bit more than in years past, thanks to tariffs. So we are hoping that we can get community donations for that. The Parks Foundation typically collects donations for that event, but also the port is going to be working with its sponsors for the 4th of July concert to try to find some additional monies for that, because it's a significantly higher expense. I think that the estimate in the budget documents is maybe, or in our lodging tax applications is maybe $54K. Maybe we can get it down to $47K, but there was a time in the past, I think it was maybe less than half that. Also, the port has started making a lot of fanfare about its upcoming centennial celebration. So you see that on some of its social media, and they're just going to be insufferable all year long next year, really celebrating their 100th anniversary. We look forward to that in concert with our 4th of July, 250th birthday of the United States celebration, and really a lot to celebrate next year.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Moving on to the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee report.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. We had our HACS meeting on November 5th. We had a couple of guests. Chuck Messenger from Veterans of America came to speak to us about the point-in-time count. The state allows for a point-in-time count to happen every other year. The county has decided that we are going to move to that format. So that will dictate our allocation for every 2 years. So this next January 29th, 2026 will be our next pit count, and we'll count for the 2027 year also. Main thing is we want to make sure we do a very accurate outreach so that we are able to capture as many folks as possible. In the last year in 2025, there were some donations and resources available for folks, about $10,000 worth, which really helped get the people who were at most need for tents or sleeping bags or whatnot. They kind of set up these give out kind of things. I know AFC did a pancake breakfast over a week. So really trying to encourage folks to share their personal situation and then also receive some really necessary items to get through the winter time. In 2025, they reached 682 people. So just as a point of interest, when we're working towards that, making sure that we do that outreach for Fidalgo Island here. He also, Chuck has his own project, which is the Pocket Community Project with United Way. And I think maybe we've talked about it in the past. He was able to get 24 cabins from the city of Bellingham. He's got volunteers working to do the necessary improvements. They've been renovated now, and they are working on possibly partnering with Mount Vernon. But as we all know, there's costs associated with utilities, connections, and figuring out some of the zoning challenges, regulations. So it was kind of exciting to hear about it. It's going to be self-managed, garden, workforce training, code of conduct, background checks, not a low barrier shelter, but a shelter that would provide a unique model for folks that can't quite afford housing. That kind of transitioned into our next discussion was having an update from our community paramedic, Steve Monrad. And he actually could think of one person in the city of Anacortes who would be a good fit for that housing option. But we wanted to, as we know, we have a real shortage of funds, and we wanted to kind of do a check-in with AFC, and our outreach person we grant for AFC, along with our community paramedic, Steve Monrad. So we talked about kind of what is working. They're seeing about AFC actually put in a shower. So they're seeing about 14 people use that shower program every week, which is a good way to kind of do a touch and provide other services. So that's been a really good thing that I don't think maybe all of us are aware of, that's an opportunity there. We talked a little bit about AFC's relationship with McKinney-Vento and the 56 unhoused kids. We talked about how some young folks are getting their mail delivered to AFC. So that is a good touch point for them. And then about our new partner is Peter Strong. If you haven't met him, he's great, from AFC, and he partners with Steve Monrad and does the outreach for folks that may need that assistance. We talked a little bit about the types of work that they can provide, which are, work on resumes, job applications, birth certificates, Medicaid elderly programs, taxi rides if they're not local here, if they need to get back to where they're from. A lot of the Boys and Girls Club having a place dedicated spots for them in the early learning facility before they get a job, the parents get a job, enrolling in Apple Health. It was a really eye-opening discussion we had. Chief Floyd was there and also talked about how the police department's actually doing less referrals than previous years because we've really addressed that T Avenue problem, but that there's been an increase in other departments that may see the need from folks and knowing that they can call Steve and Peter and get that resource to folks who may need it. We also talked to community action. So Diana was there and she talked a bit about the importance of our WIC office in Anacortes, our energy assistance because of retirees on fixed incomes, the screening for community support such as supportive housing and caseworkers, working with a housing authority and things like that. So we just wanted to make sure that we have a good understanding of all of the services that Community Action and AFC are providing and how our grants from our commitments as a city are being utilized, those funds, so that we're not duplicating services, but that we also know what services are available. So I know this was kind of long-winded, but I think it's a good update as we're talking about our budget, all of the really necessary things. And there's more, so if you have more questions, let me know. But I think that was a really important HACS meeting to have this last week.
Thank you, Ms. Cleland McGrath. It was a very fruitful meeting, full of information, especially going into the winter months. Any questions for the committee, HACS committee? Okay, we will move on to the planning committee's report. Mr. Walters.
Thank you. The planning committee met just before this meeting with Mr. Coleman and Ms. Grage. We talked about some of the challenges that the department and the city is experiencing with respect to permit review, especially as it is affected by staffing. We have more limited staff in the Public Works Department for review of project permits as a result of the layoffs. And the matrix report that we reviewed here a couple of weeks ago recommended some additional staffing and planning that is not included in the preliminary budget and that we can't reasonably afford given the current number of permit applications. So that will continue to be a challenge going forward that we are going to have to figure out how to do without until we can staff up to accommodate greater permit application load, assuming that materializes. We also talked about various issues related to the comprehensive plan and the development regulation packages. Won't go into a lot of depth on that because that's on the agenda later tonight. But we did discuss some recent growth management hearings board cases, which have found that local governments really have to do intensive planning for housing, especially for housing at the lower income level. A lot more intensive planning than has I think been the case ever before in the past as a result of recent changes by the legislature to the state law around housing. I think basically the takeaway is that it isn't, according to these cases, it isn't sufficient just to hope for housing. You really do have to have a plan for housing at the lower income level. And then some other issues related to those. We did get a comment letter from MJB about a step back issue, and we talked about what exactly that looks like in terms of their development on the waterfront. And we'll get into that when we get to that agenda item on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Any questions for the planning committee? All right, we will move on to the public safety committee report.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. We had a public safety meeting on November 4th. Yes, and we starting with police. There has been some changes to the CJTC program, requiring all of our officers to actually use the Arlington Academy instead of being able to go down south, which is fine, but it's then delayed our ability to start. One of our last officers won't be starting until December 16th. We've got 3 officers that are beginning their 3rd month of field training and should achieve solo status by the end of this year, which is wonderful. We've got a couple officers in the academy that should graduate December 18th and then start that training, field training. The CJTC cost for per person is going up to $18,000 a year. So just as a point of interest, that is going to be more than we have historically had to pay for folks going through that program. There is some non-lethal training that's going to have to happen in 2026, some recertification for trainers. The main thing is the fact that when we look at our budget that's been proposed for 2026, while we've made it work, police, like I think a lot of other departments, may be coming back throughout partly through the year to say that they may need more money. So I think it's something we should all be aware of, that they've really trimmed their training budget and travel budget and a number of other areas. So as council, we should not be surprised. The last thing we talked about with police is that Chief Floyd came to us about the boat program a couple weeks ago. He plans to come back in December with a more robust presentation, so we can revisit that just as a point of interest for all of you. We had Chief Harris and Assistant Chief McDonald from the fire department there, which was a really fruitful discussion. They came back to more fully answer some of the questions we had with the removal of the admin position for the fire department. And I think that that was eye-opening for us. And maybe more of a discussion when we talk about the budget. So the administrative assistant, just a highlight of some of the roles and responsibilities was, they were the person that dealt with the public. All of the deliveries, supplies that are required for the fire department requires a signature. So when we see supplies get delivered, that admin assistant was there 4 days a week from 7:30 to 6 and could sign for those deliveries. People come in and ask for fire permits, records, when there's records requests, when there's food, that is the person who answers those things. Smoke detectors, sharps containers, things like that. Kind of those are the more retail things, but from a real standpoint of needing to get things done, that admin assistant is also the HIPAA officer. So if there are records requests, that is the position that addresses those things, answers the phone when there's billing record requests, because their insurance is involved when it comes to transporting patients. That admin assistant addresses those insurance and record requests. Timesheets. Turns out it's pretty complicated to handle the timesheets for ongoing training for positions at the fire department. Also invoices and receipts and things such as that nature. So I know that I had asked at that meeting, what are the implications for the efficiency and level of service we expect, and how that position will be impacted and planned for. At this point, it means that the chief and assistant chief are going to be the ones who are in the office answering the phones and filling that gap. A lot of times when we've got all of our fire and EMS folks out on calls, that's the last person left in the station to address things. So probably more of a discussion, again, a long-winded report, but I think this is our opportunity to plant that seed of what kind of impact it's going to have for the fire department specifically.
Thank you, Ms. Cleland McGrath. That was very illuminating. Any questions for public safety? Okay.
Yep, Jim?
Yes.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Young.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of follow up with that. That was a great report, really elaborating on what does it mean being in the budget question of, what comes at cost of less revenue, and then some of those exchanges. I think that the challenge we'll face is the efficiency of having the chief there as having all of the workers out and about doing other things. And, for me, it would seem that the chief's greatest role not only is in managing this team and the staff, but in looking at the efficiencies of how things are done. And I think that that's minimized by him being the one to have to do this too. So I'm sure we all are aware, but I just thought it was important to say that because again, as a leader of a team that's doing the work, the hard part is trying to maximize that use for the greater safety and everything else of our city. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is public comment and
Mayor Pro Tem.
oh, sorry, Mr. Fantini.
Sorry, I had one
No worries.
other thing to add in. So on Saturday night, I went to an event for Skagit Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services. I had actually never heard of that. I've led a very lucky life where that has never been a topic that has been discussed or brought up in our family. But I had the opportunity to attend and learn about that organization and the very important work that they do for folks who really need it in Skagit County. There were testimonials there. It was very powerful to learn some of the stories of folks that have been through that. And I just wanted to take a moment to just shout out the phone number for those that may need help or services. It's 888-336-9591. It's available 24 hours. But if there's anybody out there suffering from that type of situation, there is help and availability for you to get help.
Say the number again.
One more time, it's 888-336-9591.
Thank you, Mr. Fantini. And do any other council members have anything that they'd like to add at this point of reports or anything?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr.
You mentioned the
Walters?
Housing Forum.
Yes, thank you.
As part of the North Star Project, we are putting together a housing forum on November 18th. It's 1 week from tomorrow. It's at 6 p.m. at the Mount Vernon Library Commons. We have a retired architect who is going to present the same presentation, I think, evolved slightly that he presented to Skagit County in 2011. This is the Honey, I Shrunk the Lots presentation that some of you may have seen back then. But we'll also have some more local insight into what our obligations are collectively as a county, but also as each of the individual cities with respect to housing. And registration is, I think, either required or heavily encouraged at northstarskagit.org.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. That will definitely be worthwhile. Okay, so I think that's it for reports, and we'll move on now to public comment. And we have one person signed up, and that is Susan Hill. Ms. Hill, if you'd like to come on up and repeat your name and what part of Anacortes you live in, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Oh, you have 3 minutes. Sorry, is the blue light, is it a blue light or a green light on that one?
I think it works now.
There you are. Thank you.
My name is Susan Hill and I live at the corner of 34th and Q in Anacortes. I'm also addressing the North Star project. I have no personal or financial interest in any part of North Star project. My interest stems from 4 decades as a healthcare professional, mostly in San Juan and Skagit counties. A week ago, I requested in what ended up as a written comment appended to your packet that the opioid settlement funds be made a separate line item entry for both income and expenses, as long as the funds exist to monitor use and accountability. In Anacortes, the asks to date for utilizing opioid funds unrelated to the North Star project already total $350,000. This represents 95% of the $365 grant through 2026. The North Star proposal has requested each city commit 80% of their settlement funds. By way of comparison, the cities of Mount Vernon and Burlington are fully committed to the North Star project proposal. Interestingly, the Mount Vernon mayor stated they had sequestered their funds and had not received any competing requests. Yes, we still have an opioid and fentanyl crisis right here in our city and our county. In 2024, last year, we had 250 opiate overdose cases in our county, and 1 in 6 died. Current addiction issues are now largely due to cheap and accessible fentanyl, the grandchild born of Purdue Pharma's OxyContin oxycodone aggressive sales campaign. Our city's focus on youth promotion and prevention certainly has a role. Our local school support and family care services are also very important. But this is not a zero-sum game. Some of those asks could be supported by our hardworking and generous service clubs, local donors, or a Champion Our Youth project. The issue is our local efforts and services are in no way equipped to replicate the county and city's collaborative services planned under the North Star umbrella. We have people in Anacortes and all over the county right now and for the near future who will need acute detox, transitional housing support, and comprehensive rehab services. These are the expensive yet essential services. That is why the county and cities are trying to pool resources for these critical services and to actually be able to break the cycle of addiction, homeless, detox, homeless, relapse, overdose. Granting our city's share of funds to local feel-good requests is really missing the point of the opioid settlement funding. It's about restitution for years of wrongs that have devastated families and communities and fueled the ongoing fentanyl crisis. It's about restitution so that counties like ours can develop opioid recovery efforts that have too long been inadequate or non-existent. Please make the right choice and pledge to the North Star Project. If we collaborate and work together, it's our chance to really make a difference with this problem, to save lives and families and turn this addiction nightmare into a success story for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Is anyone here in the room interested in making public comments? Just raise your hand. No, seeing none. Okay, we'll go online and see if there's anyone there. I see no hands raised. Okay, so we will move on to the consent agenda, items 5A through C. Council.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Ms. Hewitt.
make a motion to approve consent agenda items ABC.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Hubick, second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items 5A through C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, so moving on to other business, we have a discussion of the Skagit County North Star request for opioid settlement funds, and we have some guests this evening to present on that, and I believe Mr. Walters will be introducing.
Thank you. Yes, a number of us attended a North Star meeting last week that was attended by a good number of city council members and mayors from each of the cities. Some of those cities had quorums there. We didn't, but we definitely heard that also each of the other cities had received a second briefing from county staff on the request for opioid money. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity now to hear from both Commissioner Janicki and county staff as to any remaining questions that we have about the county's request for opioid support money. And so we asked on a pretty short turnaround for Commissioner Janicki to be able to present. And then we also have George Kosovich from Public Health. Recognizing that we're not talking budget tonight, but that this informs the work that we will be doing in the budget when we get back to it starting next week.
Thank you, Mr. Walters, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm Lisa Janicki, Skagit County Commissioner, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here before council. I was just reminiscing, it's been a while since I've been in your chambers, and this may be the last time I'm in your chambers while serving as commissioner. But the joint meeting of the 4 city councils with the county commissioners and of course our public health department was it was a very powerful evening and very robust discussions and conversations. And so you guys are going to get the Reader's Digest version of the information that was presented about the opiate settlement funds. And then I'll wrap it up with a little bit of a story and an ask. So George Kosovich from Public Health. George.
Thank you, Commissioner. And this is indeed kind of the Reader's Digest. I appreciate you inviting us back. We've been back to councils to provide some additional detail, answer questions about our initial proposal. And I think our goal here is just to get all of the councils on the same page in terms of what are the projects that we're proposing funding. And so I'm going to quickly do that. And you might recall from our presentation, I think it was back in late September, what our North Star initiative kind of rallied support around 3 different project areas. And the first 2 are really kind of looking for a 2-year commitment, so some ongoing programming around housing. So the first being detox bridge housing, housing that fills a gap for people exiting detox, waiting on a treatment bed, additional recovery housing, which is a form of transitional housing for folks that are in recovery, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then a one-time investment opportunity around the Star Center, so the new facility in Cedro-Woolley that's going to have crisis stabilization, detox, and co-occurring treatment beds. And so what I want to do is just give you all a little bit of information kind of about each of those projects and the intent behind them that we shared with other councils that we think you might find informative. So again, kind of with the discussion we've had is an 80-20 proposal to the city. So kind of 80% of the funding being spent on joint projects, 20% held back or made available for city-specific priorities or allocations. We talked last time about the funding that's rolled in through the middle of this year, kind of following the state fiscal year. We collectively received 2.6 million. You can see the pie chart breaks it down by jurisdiction. Now we're about almost exactly 3 million in terms of what's come in. It rolls in about $500,000 a year over a 17-year timeframe. This doesn't include the last large settlements, which was Purdue, which is about another $1 million collectively for the county and cities. So just kind of walking through the categories of what we're talking about for projects, starting with recovery housing. We've had some discussion with other councils about what does this actually mean in terms of housing? What's the demand? What's the need? And, you know, in terms of what it is, it's stable drug and alcohol-free housing for people in recovery. Tends to be kind of that transitional time frame, anywhere from a few months to a year, typically for that while people get back up on their feet. In terms of capacity in the community, we have low vacancy rates for all rental housing. We have particularly low vacancy rates for recovery housing. Those beds don't stay available for very long. Interestingly, there's a type of category called Oxford House where they actually have a live vacancy website. So you can log on, search by county, view beds. I checked this morning. There are no beds available through Oxford Houses in Skagit County as of today. We've got a couple of great recovery housing providers in our community. I've listed a few here: Rise Recovery, New Earth, Pioneer, Transitions, and they do a great job serving the community. Unfortunately, there are just some categories that aren't available. So no mixed gender options, which means if you have a family with mixed genders and kids, there's not an option available in Skagit County. Very limited options for women. There's one Oxford House that takes women, but that's it in the county. So there's both kind of a general capacity challenge, but then some categorical challenges as well in terms of service. You know, what that means is that, you know, there's an inability to kind of serve people who are raising their hand and saying, I need housing, and particularly people coming straight from the street or with unmet behavioral health needs. So that's a challenge also. And then I mentioned the idea of this bridge housing. So a very short-term challenge we have is people exiting detox, waiting typically 2 or 3 weeks for that treatment bed, need a safe place to stay in the short term. I want to quickly kind of talk about the Star Center. So we've talked about this before with you all. This is a graphic we came up to kind of talk about the different components with some other councils. I think it's useful. So Star Center is 3 different units. It's of 16 beds each. So it's crisis stabilization, withdrawal management or detox, and co-occurring treatment. And so crisis stabilization is what it sounds like. It's a licensed facility that will take somebody who's experiencing acute mental health crisis. Detox, similarly short-term stay for somebody going through withdrawal processes. And then the co-occurring treatment is an inpatient service for people that have a substance use and typically a mental health issue. And the stays there are more like 30, 60, 90 days, longer term stays. We've been talking to councils about, where does the revenue come? What does this startup cost look like? These are the co-occurring and crisis stabilization are new services in the community. We don't have a single crisis bed in the community. So what that means is our operator, Pioneer, has to establish contracts with insurance providers, negotiate rates, and that's really where the startup funding is primarily needed. They're hiring 75 staff. And we want them to launch fully staffed from day one so that they can take those drop-offs from law enforcement from day one. And that's one of the lessons we learned in talking with similar facilities, particularly in Spokane, but certainly when you talk to our friends up north in Bellingham, that for crisis stabilization, you need to be prepared and serve those law enforcement drop-offs. If you're not staffed to serve them, you can quickly kind of lose trust with law enforcement. And the intent of this is to take people that are diverted from an emergency department. And so you have to have kind of that emergency department mentality of, we're going to serve everybody from day one, no matter how many show up and when they show up, 24/7. And then one more slide that may be a little hard to read, but I think we found useful, thinking about a continuum of where do these programs fit in? How do they fit together? And work together to address the needs. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see prevention and early intervention, which is really, we need all of these services in the community. That is certainly preventing substance use early on in stages, and then kind of moving through the continuum of crisis intervention and detox and behavioral health inpatient treatment. That's really where the STAR Center fits in. Again, creating a capacity we don't have. So the behavioral health crisis intervention and co-occurring treatment are beds we don't have in the community. Detox we've got, but this is upscaling that from a subacute detox to an acute detox. What that means is that folks can be dropped off without having to go to the hospital for medical clearance. And so that's where the STAR Center fits in those three components. The other piece is we've talked about bridge housing. Really where that plays a role is filling that gap between detox and treatment, whether it's inpatient treatment or outpatient treatment. And then moving across, you can see where behavioral health transitional housing fits in. That's what Recovery House is. Talked a little bit about the gap in housing. One of the questions that you might have or might be wondering about is, hey, we have a great resource in terms of Dijwalik in our community. Where does that fit in this? And it certainly plays a key role. It's really in that outpatient side, and they're starting to get involved in planning housing. But that's really an important component and a needed component. They do a lot more than housing. They have dental and transportation services, but just want to be clear that it's certainly not duplicative of what the STAR Center does or how that works in terms of service. So in terms of timeline, and I'll encourage Commissioner Janet, you're going to come up and share some additional information. But in terms of timeline, we've had these initial city council meetings. What we're really hoping to do, and what we talked about in that joint meeting, was trying to get to decisions from councils by the end of this year. Through mostly, I think what we've heard is through their budgeting process is how councils are taking this on. In terms of settlement, just want to flag also, we have an interlocal discussion that we've been working with through the councils with as well. There's not money tied to that. It's really kind of memorializing the North Star arrangement and setting expectations, but that's happening as well. And then really getting into the next step of the agreements of how do we pull these funds? How do we get them out to providers to make the work happen?
Thank you, George. I want to answer a couple of questions before they're asked in terms of that continuum of care. 2 years ago, the North Star, under the North Star umbrella, we opened 16 evaluation and treatment beds in Cedar-Woolley on the same site where these new 48 beds are being built. So there is a total of 64 beds all on the same site. And it does allow this law enforcement drop-off, which is a really important component of diverting both, not just from the emergency departments, but also from the jail for people for whom that is appropriate. So wanted to point that out. And then we are going to be doing an open house on December 16th. I think like 100, you were all invited, but there's like 160 people who were invited. So if you are able to make your way east to Cedar-Woolley, it's a wonderful time to be able to get into that space and see there's some open beam construction. I love seeing the natural wood and the outside window wall that each pod has significant outdoor space, which is I guess that soothing in that sense of it is not your old Northern State Hospital format of what treatment looks like. So come over and see what the new model looks like, because I got to tour both Whatcom County and the Spokane County facilities, so got that idea of what this meant and how Pioneer was able to fund it. And they actually gave a lot of really good construction points as to nuances of, laundry and storage for people and places for new clothing for the folks who came in with very little. So before we turn it over to full questions, I want to share with you the why, because sometimes it's the why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? And as I think most folks have heard, because I've been so vocal for a number of years, but my husband and I lost our 30-year-old son to an overdose. And Patrick was college educated. He was employed. He was an Eagle Scout. He had medical insurance. He had all those things. I mean, he was housed. So he had all these things that theoretically should have helped him in this. But I remember clearly on a Thursday coming home from work and Patrick saying, "Mom, can you take me to a counselor's appointment at 7 p.m. in Burlington?" And I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "I'm addicted to pain pills." And he had broken his back while he was in college. And so this was now like 12 years later, when he tells us he's been addicted to pain pills. And as a mother, you're like, okay, I'm more like, okay, what do we need to do? What's next? And I remember driving him to that counselor's appointment and sitting outside of that office just in a complete panic and meltdown of my youngest child is addicted to pain pills. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. Only, people go through treatment. Well, most of them have to go through treatment again, but there's 10% who can they'll make it, they'll break through. Patrick has all these props that should be good for him. And, we drove home, and so I give him the cheerleaders thing. And he gets a call from that counselor the next day and says, she found me a bed. The only bed in Western Washington is in Longview. I don't know how many of you have driven to Longview, but it's like past the end of forever, and you're still in the state. So Mike and I drove Patrick down to Longview it used to be a nursing home, a one-story nursing home. And I'll tell you, it's a long way to think about your life and what should I have done? What could I have done different? Why am I a county commissioner if I can't even do what is needed to save my own son? And we drove down there, and then his siblings would go down and visit him. I'll tell you, it would have been a lot easier if that facility was located in Skagit County, anywhere in Skagit County, So I look at that as the time is now. Patrick passed 8 years ago, and we have this opportunity to pull together as cities and county and provide a place and space for our family members, our friends' family members, for our community members who need this, who don't have to go so far away from home just to get the treatment that they really do need. So I'm going to lay it out there. I was told that sometimes city council, it's easier if you can get your head, if you're actually given a request, a specific request. We will prepare a request, but I want to just verbalize that $3 million bogey that we're trying to hit, we have just under half of that set aside, reserved. So I'm going to be asking the Anacortes City Council for $500,000 to go toward the startup cost of that STAR Center so that we can get this thing started for Skagit County. I am sure there are questions, so I'm going to step back and, Mayor Pro
Thank
Tem,
you.
you'll moderate the.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Janicki, and thank you, Mr. Kosovich. I think it's really helpful for us to get some context and also a personal story to just help bring it home what that means, and also people in our community that we know are suffering. And we've heard from emergency response teams about how hard it is when they have the choice of, we can bring this person to the emergency room that's already overpacked, or we can bring this person to jail, and places that they may not get the help that they need and that we need them to have. So thank you both for being here and sharing with us, and I will open it up for council questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters and then Mr. Young.
If you would go back to the slide with the pie chart showing the jurisdictions with various amounts. Just past it there. Yeah. Last week at our joint meeting, I think we heard council members from Mount Vernon and Burlington mostly appear to be sort of all in on this. They also expressed surprise that we would have asks to do something other than this. I think Cedar Woolley there with much smaller amount, maybe doing direct service provision, something a slightly different mechanism. But those of us on the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee certainly spent a lot of time talking to service providers, law enforcement, EMS, community paramedic, and those types of response agencies when we were dealing with T Avenue. And I think we very much had an understanding that the problem of T Avenue was not simply a homelessness problem. It was also a problem of drug abuse and mental illness, and mostly those were co-occurring. And we can talk about how those problems are created by homelessness, as well as sometimes homelessness is created by those problems. But these services that the Star Center will be able to provide are, I think, precisely, as Ms. Moulton alluded to, what everybody was asking for. If we had more of this service, we would have been able to more readily deal with the problem that we had on T Avenue. And we have recently received reports that we don't have a T Avenue problem right now, and that we don't have an encampment on a particular street, but we do have people living in their cars on a particular street. And then they move, and they're not violative of the parking code, but they are still suffering and dealing with some of the same problems. So I think we would be fooling ourselves if we thought that T Avenue was the problem of T Avenue was fully resolved, and that we weren't going to have to deal any further with substance abuse and mental illness. We still need the services. We still need the tools. And I certainly, I would expect that all of us, maybe all of us in the audience, have had somebody in our families or our friends who have had to deal with mental illness, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and finding a treatment facility for any one of those problems is difficult. We we will do much better to have this facility in our community. And that was another one of the things that we said when we were dealing so intensively with T Avenue, is that we want local facilities for people. It's difficult to say to somebody, well, we're going to send you to Eastern Washington or something like that. But if you can say your community can still visit you, you will still have access to your community, you will still be in your community, it's a much different proposition for people. So I just want to lay that out there. It's certainly it's to me, this is precisely what we have been needing. Maybe this won't even be a sufficient number of beds. Maybe we need more beds in the future, but it is so much better than what we have had, and I think it very much deserves our full support.
Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This issue that we're discussing right now, as a society and as people, sometimes the ugliness of the reality, we tend to push a bit back from, even though we all know that it exists in our own communities, in our own family, and in the people that we love. The reality is that without facilities such as this having openings, there is no treatment. And the idea to believe that 24-hour or that going to the emergency room, because I met a gentleman here at one of the events we were having at Causland Park, and he came down. The guy happened to be African American, and he came down, and he was just unusual, just diversity's sake. And I thought, he's going to go down, and I was braced for whatever it is he may say, because I can tell he was already drinking. And so, but he came up, and in a very salient voice, he said, "I'm homeless." And it took me for a moment, and what I did after that, and he explained how people may look at him, but he wasn't on drugs. He wasn't on drugs, but again, his drug of choice was alcohol. All right, and mental illness, PTSD, and so I've gotten to know him over these years. He still checks in with me, whether he's in Alaska, Idaho, California, or wherever, but he understands this system. And when he reaches a point, he goes to the emergency room and say that he is afraid that he may harm himself. So whatever that requirement is for them to keep and evaluate him, he understands that's what it is. But when we look at the cost associated with it, when we begin to think about whether or not we want to put money in this or not, there are other costs that are already baked into the system. The services at the hospital, those are costs associated with that. The time, the effort, the limited supply of people, rooms that, sometimes you're trying to get services now and there's no bed. And so imagine even the police costs that are associated with it. So when we begin to think about what the cost really is in association with doing something like this, I think it's important that we remind society of the cost we are already paying. That whether it's break-ins, whether it's the follow-up, like Mr. Walters was saying down on our avenue, and this is a big deal. But I also think it's important that we as a society not be afraid to have these tough conversations. In my own family, I've had all of the above. And, trying to figure out how someone that you love so intensely, trying to figure out how you get them help, and then where you go from here. And then that there's no room. We'll call you in a month or 2 or 3, but the problem doesn't go away. And so, what I appreciate about this presentation that you did tonight and your story that you told, we were aware because we love you. And, but, again, it's happened to so many. And so that's why I think in Skagit County, we've got issues like any other place, but we also have opportunities. Yes, the budgets are terrible at this point. But the investment that we must make into this problem doesn't go away whether we're bounting in lots of money and resources or we're not. But in this case, I remember the Dualic Center was getting ready to get started, and it was rumblings about, do we need that here? You know, we would draw more people. And all of those things were part of the conversation. You know, we were discussing whether it is. But if I'm correct, they're on their third expansion. And it's become such a resource for the community. I believe the same thing can happen here. And what I really wanted to say too, as we look at budgets and how we appropriate money, my argument is we're already paying it. And it's only going to increase if we don't do something about it. And if families are to participate with us in this and be there for support for their loved ones, it's crucial that we have something here. And so, you know, I'm very much supportive. And I thank you for telling that story, because again, it also reminds me of my own family and the challenges and the heartbreak, but also the opportunity. And so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Fantini.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for coming and presenting again today. I had a lot of questions the last time you were here, so I've done some research myself to kind of learn a little bit more. And I think this is a very important need for our community, for not just the county, but also the city. But there are a couple of challenges that kind of come with a project like this. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit last time. You know, I am all for giving funds, pooling funds together to build and start this resource. Where my concern comes in is, you know, these settlement funds are kind of limited duration, right? So my fear would be, given the state of all of our budgets, county and cities included, is that we would make this investment, but then how are there any strategies yet in play or thoughts around how we sustain it? Because I do think it's important. I do think we should do it. I'm worried about sustainability.
That's a really good point. And, you know, my background is business financial before I came into county commissioning. And the business model has been proven out that Pioneer North, once they get up to capacity, that the billings that they can do to Medicaid and private insurers is enough to sustain the program. So it's the heavy lift is on the front end of this. And so we want them to get, you know, securely started. I'll tell you, there is a risk with our current federal landscape of disenrollment. Folks who have been or will be dropped off of Medicaid. That population is a good part of the of who ends up in treatment, and that's to whom Pioneer would bill. So I'd say that there is a level of risk that goes along right now, but I want to believe that Congress will stabilize that condition around healthcare. I mean, healthcare is too big of an issue for them to not address more head on, but they've got a lot of things on their list to start with. So the intent was in both in Spokane and Whatcom, there is not ongoing contributions to that system. And the other piece I just want to say is when money is short, it's the most important time to be strategic. And I know your budget has, you're already talking about position reductions, as are we. This is important. And that response on T Avenue or wherever those cars are parked where people are sleeping, the county is actually after the work of all the co-response team, the North Star co-response team wanted to see an expansion of embedded mental health professionals with law enforcement. And so the county has MHPs and it will be approving 2 more positions so that boots on the ground, frontline support can work with law enforcement in different jurisdictions and go out and meet your people where they are. So that's the intent is to be within the city limits, even though those positions will be funded by county dollars, and we're utilizing HB 2015 dollars to make that happen. We just approved taking that 1/10 of 1% for law enforcement.
Okay, thank you. I have one other small question too. That was super helpful, so I appreciate that. Also, one of the challenges I feel like could be managing the funds and reporting on the outcomes and kind of ensuring compliance with the 15% administrative cap and all of that. How are we gonna, and maybe this is in the interlocal, I don't know, but how are we gonna manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we'd be accountable for. Particularly on the Star Center, we've already been working with Pioneer on reporting outcomes. They have some pretty consistent outcomes they report to the healthcare authority on number of folks served, where they come from, and outcomes around where they end up. So I think we're going to be collecting that information. We'd be happy to work with the cities on making sure that's the data that you'd be satisfied with. And then, ideally making it easy for the provider to have a consistent data set that they report. But it's something we've got built into our contracts.
Okay. Miss Hill's comments from earlier and also feedback that I've been getting from constituents, there is a lot of support. At least I'm hearing a lot of support around this idea. I just really want us to be able to sustain it should we go this route. So thank you for your words.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. McDougall.
Thank you. And thank you both for the terrific presentation and for being here. I actually don't really have a question anymore because TJ got the main one. So I really appreciate the explanation around essentially the decoupling of startup cost and then the ongoing Medicaid billing sort of function. So thank you. And I also really appreciate the point about being strategic and this being essentially like an opportunity to take advantage of sort of economy of scale, working together to deliver like larger impact outcomes. So, I'm definitely inclined to support. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you both for coming here and sharing your story, your experience. I think that, it's easy to always think it's the other that is going to go through this challenge in your life. But really, it is not just folks that we see out on the street. These are people that are high functioning and are going to be folks that we'd never expect to have this challenge. And having the resource and not nearby is, I think, incredibly important. And if we don't have that resource, we're doing a disservice to our community. So one thing that from our meeting we had this last week, I just want to say that those meetings are incredibly valuable. I think that the newest this format where we're doing kind of a roundtable with all of the council members and then county commissioners and staff, I really builds the confidence that we are all on the same page. It allows us to hear the questions and concerns and really look eyeball to eyeball and realize we might be different cities, but we're the same community. And folks that are going through this, it doesn't really matter what city they're coming from. What matters is that they're part of our world or our neighbors and our neighborhood. At the last meeting, 2 things came up. One is it finally sunk in for me, at least, that yes, the Star Center startup costs is a one-time, hopefully, situation. That's how the model works. And then insurance providers kind of kick in, and that's why having the staff of 75 is so important and having it up and running and partnering with that provider to get it all going at the same time versus doing a more slow, onboarding at a slower pace, which I was kind of curious about because I think we've seen other outreach programs need that slower pace onboarding. So that's helpful. The other thing is there was a slide at the meeting, and I think it talked about kind of the process. I think it might be helpful for all of council and the public to hear, if what other cities are planning to do if we earmark these funds, going out for an RFP, things like that. I think that's helpful to kind of see what those steps are. Do you have that? Did I miss it? Yeah, for pooling. I think that's just helps us understand really how it's gonna happen.
Yeah, so we've kind of talked about how would this work with councils, and I think what we've particularly around the housing piece where we might do an RFP. So we would do kind of a request and see which proposals and providers came in. So what we have proposed is kind of a two-step process. So I mean, the first step is really each council decides, yes, we're in on recovery housing as an example. And then we could do a joint RFP, bring together a committee with members from each city, review those, and then come back to the city kind of and saying, here's what we're selecting. Let's get that final approval on the project. So I think that's what you're talking about, council member.
Okay, so I also wanted to recognize that Commissioner Wiesen has joined us. He's in the room, and I thank him for being here for this also. And a couple things is I pretty much agree with everything that's been said by my fellow council members. Also, I appreciate the research and development that has gone into this with visiting Spokane and visiting Whatcom County and learning from those other jurisdictions what works and the best way to do things. It's great to not always be the first to do something. And also, I think the importance that Ms. Cleland McGrath alluded to of the county and the cities and the mayors and the council members all working together and learning from each other and pulling together, because also, like she said, it's not just isolated to one area. It's our region, it's our neighbors, and we do have the economies of scale in working together. And it's going to help all of us. It's going to elevate all of us and our ability to tackle this crisis. And that's exactly what this money is for. So I really appreciate that as well. And I'm very grateful for your being here and taking the time to go over this with us and council's comments as well. Is there anything? Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Thank you.
I think that means briefly.
The reality is the problem is not instantly fixed. It is a problem that continues. Even if you're able to begin to address it one by one with different people, it also requires work to stay that way, to stay clean, to stay moving forward. And whether that means jobs, opportunities, it's the one of the worst thing in the world I find happening, and even as a kid growing up, is when people go to jail for whatever reason and they come out not being able to get a job. And then society asks them to not do whatever it takes in order to have money and food on the table. I don't know how we can say that if we want this to be a success, it requires follow-up. It requires continual participation in other options that they can have to choose those other options. That's our reality. Thank you.
And that's really intuitive, because coming out of treatment, you might be clean, sober, and have those basic tools, but a supportive housing situation like New Earth Recovery provides and some of the other nonprofits provide, where there's counseling where you have a set routine and you're attending meetings daily, and then, they can make those connection with employers who are willing to hire folks who are, non-traditional first-time workers sometimes. That all helps. And then that Oxford model, for some people, is a forever model. That is one where it's self-regulated with the 8 people who live in the house. So that continuum of care becomes more defined as you recognize what those actual needs are. But people coming out of treatment need help, they need support, they need love, they need prayers, they need all of that. So thank you.
Okay, well, thanks again for being here and all your work on this, and we're glad to be a part of it. All right, so agenda item 6B is a contract award for the wastewater treatment plant administration building addition. And City Engineer Logan Lee and Interim Public Works Director as well is here, as well as Brian Walker as backup. So Mr. Lee, tell us what's happening here.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council and those in attendance. Tonight I bring before you a contract in the amount of $876,928 with Summit Construction Group for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant admin expansion project. And so just as a reminder, this is our wastewater treatment plant, and circled in red is the administration building where the expansion will happen. And then the current plan for the actual expanded footprint of the building is circled in red here. And the project will add approximately 1,300 square feet to the existing structure, which creates more laboratory space, more space for the treatment plant operators, more space for the SCADA technicians, as well as a appropriate break room for the crews, as they don't have a dedicated break room, which per the Teamsters current labor agreement, they're required to have. And then just some additional kind of context regarding the project. This project was first conceived in 2014 as a complete remodel. And since then, we have basically stripped it down to just the bare bones to try to be as budget conscious as possible. And the intent is just to provide adequate working conditions for current staff and potential future growth. And the plant was constructed in 1982, just to kind of demonstrate how much growth the city's gone through, and specifically at the wastewater treatment plant since then. Is the population has grown by about 50%, loading has grown by 30%, laboratory analysis, lift stations, and regulatory permits that we have to be in compliance with have all doubled. So the crews are doing a lot more work than they were when the plant was originally built, and with the same amount of staff, as no new staff positions have been added in 34 years. So the project has been in the CFP in 2025 and 2026, and its funding is via utility rates. And the building costs are going to continue to increase. So I think now is as cheap as it's going to be to do this project. So if you have any other questions, myself and our wastewater treatment plant manager are here to answer them. So
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Council, any questions? Or, yes, Mr.
Mayor
Young?
Pro Tem. I'm looking to parcel my words. I'm very supportive of the idea. I think the challenge that I'm having now is one, the budget. Two, that we are postponing hiring, letting some people go. And my question is more about, I recognize that we need it because we've talked about this before, and this is something that the team needs, everything else about it. I really do get that. My challenge that I'm hoping you can give me good information on is why now? Can it be delayed, let's say a year, and we take a look and see where we are financially as a city? And is this what you would perceive as a critical need right now in lieu of where we are as a city in a budget? Because again, we are in a tough spot. And so for me, ordinarily, I would say yes, because we had already talked about this. We had already, all the benefits of coming from it. But right now, where I am now, I don't initially perceive this as a critical thing for moving forward that we need as a city right now. Is it something that we would jump to next after we figure out what's happening? Yes. So convince me of why now. And tell me why this is not something that can't wait.
Well, to answer your first question, I would call this a critical need. We have adjusted our capital facilities budget to allow, we prioritized all of our projects and pushed out the ones that we feel can be pushed out. The city has at this point made all of the front end investments on this project, and to delay it would incur more costs. The project has been, like you mentioned, 10 years in the coming, and we really took it to heart when this was sent back 10 years ago. It was deemed too extensive and too expansive at that time. And so we have done everything that we can to try and get the necessary square footage for the team to get this greater amount of work done for the least cost. I think we've achieved that. We have preserved the necessary footprint for process components in the future. Again, like it was said, it's not going to get any cheaper in the future, and will likely incur more costs. This is going to alleviate some problems with the Teamsters. Conflicts in using their space has risen to the grievance level multiple times.
So
Nothing to add to that?
I'm going to pop in
Sure.
now, and I would just say, seeing that this was conceived as a complete remodel 11 years ago and has been vastly scaled back, it's required by our contract with the Teamsters. Is that right? We don't have a break room for our people. A lot of the things have doubled that our staff is required to do without adding staff positions in 34 years. And also, and I appreciate the scrutiny of the budget. We're all working really hard to do that right now, including staff. And it's funded via utility rates that aren't able to be used in the ways of staffing in other departments, which we're all suffering some heartache over. So this money is for projects like this.
Thank you. That was additional thought about, and with so much coming at us in so many ways, all of the departments, the budgets, the issues, the challenges, that extra piece is very important. So, Ms. Moulton, I really appreciate how you kick in on that. But yeah, no, I hear you and I appreciate that.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. And Ms.
Mayor-
Cleland McGrath.
Thank you.
Yes.
Didn't this come to us a couple of years ago, or was it a year ago? And it was a more extensive remodel, and we said, hey,
It originally started in 2014, and then I think it was turned back in 2016. And then this has been on both the 2024 and the 2025 capital facilities plan. The reason it's not done yet is because it overlapped with the outfall project. So there were necessary delays there. There were delays with the conditional use permit. There was a new Washington State Energy Code, which threw us for a loop, and some additional engineering costs. So it's been a long road to get where we are right now, which is the starting line for this project.
So I guess I would say that, yes, we've been working on this a long time. I think you have refined it pretty significantly. I would also say that, if I'm correct, there was no lactation room before, so people were just using the bathroom. Is that right? Some version of that, maybe not.
Somehow the wording got in there that one of those rooms is for lactation requirements.
Is it not?
I don't know if that's actually a requirement. That is not the reason that room is being
Fair.
built, but if it checks that box, that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's not going to be a room dedicated just
Sure.
for that, but it's a state law to have that space available, and it'll be one of the possible uses.
And the point is, there wasn't one of those. Wasn't there? Yes. There wasn't one before. There were some issues with locker rooms. Has that been addressed with this remodel?
There were 2 bathrooms added back in 2015.
Okay. All right. And I think for just the public, some of the questions we're having is just because we did not get the floor plan for this in our packet, which is fine. I get it. It's like, it's good enough. But I guess it's nice to have these clarifications, and I am in support of it. Is there anyone else who did you want to make a comment? Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm not Mayor Pro Tem.
Logan's put the slide back up there. So it's basically just 2 bump outs on the east and west side for the additional square footage. And the benefits that we're going to see are actually within the existing building because we're going to get 25-30% more laboratory space out of this deal because we have people with their workstations in the laboratory. We're flat out of laboratory space. And so getting those folks out of the laboratory and into some actual offices is going to help us greatly.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, because it's really small and I have good vision, but I can't read it. So it's nice to kind of know what the additional uses will be. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Hubig.
Thank you. And you touched on something that I was going to ask about. That other slide said that like lab testing and stuff like that's doubled. I'm assuming that these are also lab tests that are required by the state. And if they're not completed on time, there are fines.
Yeah, our only other choice is to send these labs out to an offsite lab, and we're having increasing problems with that. It's to our benefit to do as many of these analyses in-house as possible. We have some additional accredited parameters that we're going to need to achieve within the next couple of years. And again, we simply don't have the space to do it right now. So if I can get humans out of that space and use it as an actual lab, that's going to be better.
Okay, so this is just one step to make things easier for us in the future.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor
Mr.
Pro Tem.
Fantini.
I'm in favor of moving forward this. I actually remember, I think you came, it was like one of your first meetings here and presented it and we tore you up over the map, over the architect's design. So thanks for bringing it back. I think with everything that we are planning over the next several years, as we've seen in the comp plan, with the addition of all the housing, whether it be ADU, cottage housing, triplexes, duplexes, the list goes on. This is a really important part of town to have functioning well. And, I remember on my tour there, looking around and being like, why are there a bunch of people practically working on top of each other? Because there is a space issue there. And to their credit, they were all happy and in good spirits about it. But I think with what we have coming up and the growth that is expected here, obviously there's probably going to be other water projects that wastewater projects that come along that we're going to need to fund capital wise to serve all of those people. But that definitely starts in kind of administrative area. Like you definitely want to make sure you have enough workstations, you have enough, right, for the anticipated growth that we're expecting to see. So if there's no other comments, which I'm sure there will be, I move that the council authorize the mayor to sign contract 24139 SEW002 with Summit Construction Group in the amount of $876,928 to perform the wastewater treatment plant administrative building addition project.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Fantini and a second by Mr. McDougall, but I believe Mr. Walters would like to chime in here.
Thank you. And Mr. Walker, if you could come around in front of the podium so you're pointing directly at the mic. Just there we go. Perfect. So the cover sheet indicates that the earmarked funds are the 2024 CFP, but that doesn't actually tell us much about what the source of funding is. I found that one of the two projects in the CFP, the second is the admin boiler and controls. It's in the summary, but I didn't find the detail view. Are we achieving everything that the admin boiler and controls project was supposed to be as part of this project?
We've already addressed half of that project. We were able to replace the boiler system about a year ago. The HVAC controls portion of that has been rolled forward into the facilities condition assessment done by McKinstry. And so this project does not address remodeling of the existing building. This is just square footage addition to the existing building.
Okay, so whatever that project description was, admin boiler and controls, that is assumedly being evolved in the 2025 CFP?
That's
correct. Or 2026 CFP?
Correct.
Okay, but we're spending some of its funds, its allocated funds. Is that what the cover sheet is conveying?
Yeah, actually, if Steve could come up and I don't have a copy of the current CFP in front of me right now, and it has changed considerably.
Well,
over the last
and
couple of months.
the current, I mean, the new CFP isn't adopted yet, but I guess my root question is, are all the funds that are going into this wastewater utility funds?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. So that's an easy one. And that means it's really insulated from most or almost all of the budget problems that we've been having. Because that's really a constraint in general revenue, and there's no general revenue going into this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So motion remains on the table from Mr. Fantini with a second from Mr. Young and Mr. Francia.
No,
Oh,
Bruce,
Mr.
Mr.
McDougall.
McDougall.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry. Second by Mr. McDougall. I was just looking over at that end. So Mr. Franciac, will you take the roll, please?
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we will move forward with the interlocal agreement with San Juan County for mutual assistance. And this will be led by Mr. Ludeman. Welcome, Mr. Ludeman.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and public. Tonight I have a contract for interlocal agreement with San Juan County for mutual assistance. And you'll remember earlier this year, we did a interlocal with Mount Vernon for mutual assistance, and they were able to come do some street striping for us, and it worked out really well. We have similar contracts with City of Oak Harbor, and I believe the county as well. This is coming up now because we were reached to by San Juan County for some stormwater work they need. They need some help cleaning some catch basins. They don't have the equipment to do it. So they've asked us to come out on 2 different days to do some work for them. So that's what this is stemming from. It'll actually work both ways. Eventually, they have some equipment we could probably use in the future. So it's a win-win for both agencies, I think.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Young?
Thank you. Mr. Ludeman, I just wanted to take the moment here and thank you for the quality of work that you've always tried to push forward here.
Thank you.
I've watched you from the very beginning at the depth of how you pulled together the pieces, understood that being frugal with dollars was important. And I just wanted to really say thank you. You know, I know we don't get a chance to say it so often, but I really do appreciate what you do. I'm sure, you know, I speak for myself, but I believe I can sort of speak for council on this one. But just to let you know how much we appreciate it. And in this case here, unless there's any other comments by council, all right. I move that the city authorize the mayor to execute interlocal cooperation agreement 25-256-IDS-001 between the city of Anacortes and San Juan County.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Young, a second by Ms. Hubick. Mr. Franciac, would you take the roll, please?
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is ordinance 5005, which is setting the 2026 property tax levy. And this is one for discussion and possible action. And here's Mr. Hoagland to tell us about it.
Thank you, Ms. Moulton, members of the council, members of the audience. So I do have three ordinances that I want to talk about tonight. All 3 of them are separated on the agenda. The first one is related to the 1% property tax increase. And this would be second read for this ordinance. I presented this for the first time October 6th when we had the revenue public hearing. And again, this is adopted by ordinance. The city is allowed to take the lesser of 1% or the IPD, the implicit price deflator which is published by the Office of Management and Budget in September, the IPD was 2.44, so a 1% increase is what we are requesting via ordinance. So the ordinance is required to outline both the percentage increase and the dollar amount, which is again 1%, and that works out to $85,646. I do want to remind council the 1% property tax increase is assumed in the revenue budget for 2026. Reminder how the property tax levy works in Washington State. That's based on the assessed value of your house, which is broken down by number of thousands. So $750,000 house, what you would do is take the overall citywide assessments, break that down into thousands, that works out to 6.5 million. Our current levy is 8.5 million. Divide that into each other, that works out to $1.31 millage. Apply that against the number of thousands. In this case, this example, we have a $750,000 house, $1.31 times 750 works out to a $983 per year levy for this homeowner. A 1% increase on that would work out to $9.84, which works out to about 82 cents per month in this example. So I guess I was thinking, if it works for council, I can go through each one of these. I just have a simple slide for each one of these ordinances, can go through each one of those and then come back. I can bring up the ordinance and put it on the screen, and then council can decide if there's questions, and on the property tax ordinance, if you want to take action. We talked about this utility tax increase. So this is something that's also assumed in the revenue budget. Currently, city code assesses a 7% utility tax charge against water, sewer, and storm sewer utilities. And the 7% rate, was set in 1973. So it's been, the utility tax itself was set much earlier than that, but that 7% rate that we are currently charging was set in 1973. So what we are proposing is to increase the rate from 7% to 9% on those three utilities: water, sewer, and storm sewer. We would not include the solid waste utility in this proposal. I have listed here $613,000. That's the number that we came up with in our initial analysis. I believe we presented this to council at the mayor council retreat. The ordinance that I included, I have a different number. I believe I used 640,000. I apologize for that inconsistency, but in both cases, it is an estimate, but that 613 is the original analysis estimate that we came up with. We used a homeowner with 323 cubic feet of water consumption. That particular month that we used as an analysis, that's the number that we came up with as an average from that segment we were looking at. And that would work out to roughly $2.50 per month increase for that particular utility customer. This would affect our city customers, our in-city residential and commercial customers, as well as the industrial customers or the refinery customers. So we have two industrial customers. They're both the refineries. We currently do not charge utility tax to the other water purveyors. We have clauses in the contracts with them that identifies that we won't pass on the state utility tax. And our practice has not been to charge that city utility tax to those other water purveyors. There used to be a state law in place that prohibited that. That has been removed. That state law was changed 10 or 15 years ago, but that tax implementation has never been made for those other water purveyors. City of Oak Harbor, LaConner, PUD, and I feel like I'm missing one, but.
Ms. Moulton?
Mr. Young?
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, sorry. Mr. Hoagland, would you elaborate just a little bit on that? Are we saying now that in these rates that we're talking about, it applies to them as well, correct? And if so, I guess is the $613,000 is the estimate of what all of the revenues from this increase would mean to the city of Anacortes. Is that correct?
That's correct. So that additional 2% on those three utilities, water, sewer, storm,
Mhm.
only affecting the existing customers that pay utility tax now would generate an additional $613,000 per year. The majority of that would come from the refineries, just to be
Right.
clear. They consume about 70% of the water that the
Right.
city sells. So they would pay their share, that additional 2% on their share of the water consumption. And then our in-city residential and commercial customers would also pay that additional 2%.
And I know, it was a tremendous amount of thought to go into this whole process. I guess what I'm curious about, and you may have it in part of your presentation, is that I think you mentioned that there was, the law at one point prevented us from applying an additional tax or whatever it was to those people, but it's not there anymore. And I know we may or may not want to begin to look at that as an option for us. I guess what I'm looking to in this is in weighing out the fact that, of course, the citizenry here are exhausted of additional taxes. We can anticipate more happening by way of the other people, the other organizations and stakeholders coming forward with their additional tax. So for me, my question is, I'm sure you thought about it, but what would it be if we raised the tax on those purveyors plus that additional tax? And how much money would come just from residency alone, meaning of the 613,000? If we did or did not tax the residents of Anacortes and, housing, and we only did the water purveyors, the users of that in the system, whether it's Oak Harbor, Lacana, the Tribe, or Mount Vernon. Could we still generate that revenue? Is that something, I guess I hear what you're saying, and I know you've thought long and hard about it. I applaud you as well. I've always been a fan of your conservatism when it comes to financial management. But, again, I'm just curious about taxing additional citizen taxes. And if that tax or the revenue we're looking to generate can be made through those others without a tremendous burden on them as well. And what I mean by the others is the cities, the tribes, those other users.
Yeah, right.
I hope you understand the point. The point I'm just trying to say is, could we make up that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hoagland, I know we talked about this in the finance committee, but yeah, for the whole council, this will be super helpful. Thank you.
The provisions to apply that utility tax against the water users, that's established in our city code. So they're to try to stay in my lane as much as I can, but I believe to add additional customers to that, we would have to add, which is fine, it's totally, I think, doable, but we would have to add some additional language into the city code to include those other water purveyors. And then we looked at I believe we estimated that a 1% utility tax on those other water purveyors would generate about $30,000. So for each percent, it would be about 30,000. So if we implemented a 3% tax, it'd be about 90,000 per year. In terms of if we can just apply the tax to just one set of users, or I don't know how to answer that. Again, back to the city code, the way it's established, we identify those the refinery group and the residential and commercial users. So that part to me seems clear on how to make that adjustment. I would need some help in figuring
You've
out how to
answered my
carve
question.
out the.
You really have answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fantini.
Mr. Hoagland, I just have a question about this. So as far as this would take effect January 1?
Yes, that'd be the intent.
Okay.
Sorry, so the rate would take effect in January, so it would come out in February bills.
Okay, how will our constituents be notified of the increase? Like, is there something that will be on the bill that says, or do they just, hopefully they read the paper or like?
Right, so there aren't any specific requirements for doing notifications of these types. I mean, we do the ordinance publication and things of that nature. We can put notes on the utility, the invoice itself, the bill itself that goes out. We can put notes. We can put notes on our website, on the city website, but at the end of the day, or at the end of the month when the bill comes out, most people probably won't know that that's coming until they see the bill.
Sure.
I mean, we can do as much outreach as we can with the tools that we have, but just kind of historically, we know that we are going to get a lot of phone calls about the increase.
Sure. I guess my bigger point about it is like, I'm not like $250 a month increase is not a big deal to me, but I feel like to some of our seniors who are on fixed incomes, it is. And there is, because I've heard Mr. Walters mention it before, there is help for that kind of thing. And so my hope would be that maybe we could include, I think most of our seniors probably I still get mine by mail. Maybe we could include something in there that, even if it doesn't talk about the increase, but just reminds folks that if they're on a fixed income, if they have that type of thing, that there is help for relief from their bill. I think that could be really a gesture of goodwill for those in our community.
Yeah, certainly. And we would do that. We would do that type of outreach through the utility billing, system, the tools that we have available, and, remind those customer bases that qualify that there is relief, both at the county through the property tax system and through the city for that reduction in, the low income reduction.
Right, and I'm just going to chime in here that is something that is automatically done. The seniors who are enrolled in the property tax discount program at the county, we automatically enroll them in our utility discount program. So that's happening. And also just a shout out to Community Action's low income heating and energy assistance program, LIHEAP for short, that people can sign up for through Community Action, and that helps people pay their utility bills also, particularly this time of year. And I feel like there's one other thing, and we do put it's on the website, I think, the utility discount, and I also think we call it out in A-Town as Our Town, but we know that the more communication, the better, certainly. So anything that could be done in that way as a heads up could be helpful as well. Mr. McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. And actually, thank you, Mr. Young, for your line of questioning sort of led perfectly into mine. Because I had wondered sort of prior to the meeting about, can we have essentially a different rate for different customer types, if you will. And I think of this as, this is essentially profit. It's called a tax, but it is essentially profit on a good delivered. If we were to consider, say, 3% on the other water purveyors, in addition to say 2% on the residential, could the industrial be 2.5% or 3%? Or could we consider just 2.5% for residential and industrial? And of course, going from 0 to 3 on the other water purveyors. It sounds like those rates can be decoupled from each other.
I believe so. Again, back to the code, I believe we would have to add sections to that Anacortes Municipal Code to identify what rates we're going to be charging to those customer bases. And just it's kind of a fine point, but it's an important point that the city is charging the water utility for this tax, and the water utility is then collecting that tax from the customers.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how or if that plays into this conversation, but at a minimum, we would have to look at the code and establish, that change in code so that different customer bases were charged different tax amounts.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like, well, I was thinking back to 2 weeks ago when we learned that our electric bill, our PSE bill at the water treatment plant went up by 50%. So it sounds like there isn't necessarily a uniform rate, at least at that highly regulated utility. So sounds like a non-uniform rate is a possibility. Thanks.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. Profit's not quite the right word, but I think when we discussed it, and I think Mr. Walters has brought it up, that additional tax is then general fund unrestricted income. Is that correct? I mean, I think that that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
Whereas the charging goes, the other portion, it goes to the actual utility to maintain and the cost of that. But that percentage that is added on by the city through ordinance gets to get put in the general fund for whatever we need it for.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a general tax revenue.
So just for the public, I think we all we know it, but it's a revenue source to assist in the future. So thank you.
Yes, that's definitely helpful. And this is the first read of this one also. And it sounds like council is interested in a little bit more information on possibilities of increasing that tax more for industrial users. I mean, there's a lot to think about here. And also if we would levy it on purveyors as well. I know this is a crazy time to be assigning extra work, but I think that that's a desire that we would like to at least take a look at it, maybe not delve super deep into it, but just like kind of high level, like what would this look like? And is this reasonable? And what would it take if it would get us another, I don't know, some tens of thousands of dollars that we could use? Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. Hoagland?
Yeah, if you could, I'm happy to bring back whatever council wants. I guess I just need to know what
Specific.
that is. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Fantini.
Mayor Pro Tem, I am kind of in the thinking space of Mr. McDougall as well, which is, I feel like if we're going to increase rates, it should be on, like, it's shared pain, right? When we're all going through a tough time, I feel like sharing the pain is kind of necessary. I would be very curious to see, like, I would love to not tax our residents as much as our, I would be interested in seeing a tiered model of what you think we could do creatively. And I guess my question is, purveyors of water, who would be, is that like Harbor?
That would be Oak Harbor, City of Lacan.
And so by this, are they not getting a tax increase on this?
They are not
No,
being taxed.
we have never levied utility tax against those water purveyors. Again, back to kind of traditionally, it was driven by state law. That law was changed a number of years ago. We never changed that to include those water purveyors. So we have never charged them. We still don't. They're not included in this analysis. We certainly could include them. It's when we looked at the amount of revenue that would generate versus kind of our history with those customers. That's why I chose not to bring that forward. Again, roughly 30,000 per % increase to those customers. It's not a lot of revenue, and it would be, I just envisioning a lot to push that forward with, 4 other cities and tribes.
Sure, and I think that is fair. And also, if we think about our industrial customers, they bear the largest part of the burden already of the percentage they're paying for the water and for the tax. So I think that's something that we really need to approach carefully, and I'm not sure the best way to do it. I don't know. I like the conversation that we're having and the ideas, but as far as how realistic it is and how much sense it makes if we're going to try to put this off on people that I appreciate trying to spare our residents. Just a reminder that the 7% tax has been in place since 1973, and $250 a month. I know it can be death by 1,000 cuts in a way to, it's just a tough situation, but here we are looking at, we need this money. I mean, we're already cutting services. Every department has cut millions of dollars from their asks from the 2026 budgets. And I know every department and finance particularly has done everything that they can to get us to a point where we can make this work. So I'm not sure how much we want to ask right now to try to do more, but this is a council, not just me.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr. Young.
I think all of these are fair questions. I think everything needs to be on the table. We're definitely not trying to take advantage of anyone, but for a discussion of this type with the revenues that we're all in need of, and I think as my colleague here said, the pinch has to be felt uniformly as best as we can. And to the point that you made about just trying not to put it off on everybody else, I totally get that. But I do think that's a discussion we should have as a council once we get some of the numbers and see if we want to explore it further or not. I think this would be a very good discussion.
Okay, so I think that we have established, though, that it would be about $30,000 if we added it to the water purveyors, and that's going to be sort of an iffy thing. And if that's something that we really think is worth pursuing or not. And I also just want to give a call out that this is turning out, has all the makings of an epic meeting. And regardless of if we keep talking about this or not. So, Ms. Cleland McGrath.
I think it's good for us to reinforce the fact that the proposed budget from the mayor is assuming that we're increasing this by 2%, correct?
That's correct.
Is there any reason we couldn't wait? I mean, we're getting towards the end of the year. Is there any reason we couldn't look at some of the other proposals for wholesale customers next year if we feel like that's something where we could do more of a deep dive? Is there any reason we have to do it right now when we're doing it
Well,
here?
no, if I understand what you're asking correctly. So we, when we were putting together the draft budget, we kind of pushed this utility tax increase to the top because when we went through the different options of increases and decreases at the Mayor Council retreat, this was one of the revenue increase options that kind of had more support, and there was kind of, more meat on the bone per slice, I guess. We could make and kind of a material difference in revenues by utility tax. So that's kind of why this came to the top. What we're assuming is the customers that are currently paying utility tax, if we wanted to take a look at the other water purveyors, I think next year would be great. We will file that away and start looking at that, and have something for you to see when we go through our revenue public hearing next year. I like that idea a lot.
Great. I like it too. And I'm seeing nods across the dais. So thanks. Let's do that.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, Mr. Walters.
I wrote it down. We'll remember. There's one other important point here that I don't think has been made yet, and that is that utility tax, sales tax are rates. So they increase as prices increase. Property tax is not really a rate in the same way. So property tax from year to year is not increasing. We levy this 1% increase, but with inflation at 3%, we are losing 2% purchasing power every year. So to the greatest extent possible, if we can trade an increase in sales tax or utility tax, not necessarily in the rate of it, but in the amount of revenue collected. So for instance, with sales tax, we collect more if there's more economic activity. If we can trade our proportion of general revenue from property tax to sales tax or utility tax, we will be better off. Because every year property tax is getting smaller and sales tax and utility tax are, because they are a rate, they're at least keeping up with prices in the economy. So I definitely think that we need to look at more options on the side of utility tax. However, I did look at the AWC survey of utility taxes, and we're really right in the middle. Everybody on the public side is at 6%, it seems. And certainly there are some outliers on the private side, 20%, some jurisdictions have levied, but we're right in the middle. And I think right in the middle is pretty close to where we want to be. At 9%. When we raise it 2%, we will be right in the middle there. So I'd be reticent to raise the rate higher, but we do need to shift our balance of general revenue towards sources of revenue that are indexed to the economy.
So I think, so my takeaway.
It looked like a trip.
My takeaway for next week to bring back and discuss utility tax further is if we can look at different rates of utility tax for the different segments of the rate payers. So if we have a different rate for refinery customers, different rate for retail customers, different rate for, other wholesale customers. Is that?
We said that's going to be next year, right?
Well, I thought we were talking about two different things evidently. So I thought you were talking about the other water purveyors, which is LaConner, Oak Harbor, PUD, and the Swinomish. We currently do not charge them city utility tax. The refineries we do charge, and we charge the refineries the same rate as our in-city customers. So I thought you were talking about next year looking at an application of utility tax to Oak Harbor, LaConner, PUD. But decoupling the two rates that we charge residential customers versus refinery customers.
Mr. McDougall?
That's how I understood it as well. Like maybe next week, we just are given a very simple summary table to compare. What's it look like if we go residents and industrial at 2%? What's it look like residents and industrial at 2.5%? And what's it look like residents at 2, industrial at 2.5?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, Mr. Young.
That's exactly what I was trying to allude to when we started this conversation. And I think that the great thing about it is that it gives us information to make a decision one way or the other, but it gives us a real universal look. And thank you.
Okay, great. All right, moving on.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
The third ordinance that I wanted to talk about tonight, this would be related to our emergency reserve balance, also known as our rainy day fund. So this is the cash reserve that we set aside for those events of emergency. We have a policy, it's called our fund balance policy, that identifies how we establish that amount, and it's 17% of the actual expenditures from the previous year. So part of our year-end procedures, we finish up fiscal year 2025, we're doing our reconciliations, we figure out what our actual expenditures were for 2025, and then we make an adjustment to the emergency reserve fund that represents 17% of those actual expenditures. We do journal entry to make that change, and that becomes our emergency reserve fund for the following year, 2026. So what I'm requesting is that we freeze our emergency reserve fund where it's at. Right now, it's at 5.336 million. My estimates, based on historical cash flows, looking through the end of the year, I was estimating we would add an additional 492,000 to that emergency reserve balance. So it would grow from 5.3 to 5.7 million. So because we are projecting relatively low levels of cash for the end of the year, and 5.3 million is not an unreasonable amount of cash to have set aside for emergency reserve, I was proposing that we freeze our emergency reserve at that 5.3 million until such time that cash flows are sufficient to, again, support that change to a 17% balance.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
Your second premise there that 5.3 million is not an unreasonable amount to keep in the rainy day reserve. 17%, this is going to be less than that. 17% is the recommended number, right? That's why, I mean, essentially 2 months. That's why we have adopted 17%.
That's correct. So that 17% comes from GFOA, Government Finance Officials Association. Recommended best practices is 2 months reserve, which is about 17%. I hope I'm not taking liberties by, making that assessment that it's a reasonable amount. My thinking is 5.3 million is well beyond what half our property tax levy is. We know we're going to get, at a minimum twice a year, 4.25 million in property taxes. If one of those were to go away entirely, we would still have enough to at least replace that just out of our existing cash reserves. I don't know that that's super sound thinking, but that's kind of the logic that I had in mind.
Well, my concern is, it's a best practice for a reason. And if we were to need more than that in the rainy day reserve, we will then be in a situation where we needed it and we didn't have that full amount because we weren't following the best practice. So, I think our own policy says we can spend down this amount. Maybe the entire policy that's in the ordinance that's cited here could also use another look, and we can do that next year. But I would feel more comfortable if, rather than the text here, we said we're going to freeze it not until such time as the finance director determines there is sufficient cash to come back to 17%, but also to add a 1-year limit so that we're not thinking in terms of less than 17% when we put together next year's budget. Now, we can do this same thing again next year if we have to. I just don't want us to, on a permanent basis, determine that we are going to drop below the recommended amount. Does that make sense to others? This is a 1-year thing,
So
unless we decide to extend it by the same mechanism.
Yeah, so it'd be a 1-year freeze, not until the finance director decides. You would have an endpoint on there.
Right. And that's kind of consistent with what the policy says right now. What talks about 1 year, there's a 1-year limitation on being able to spend it down, and then you have to build it back up or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
This is not quite the same scenario, but it's similar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I've
Sounds
seen some nods. Seeing nods now, yes, okay. Okay, so if those are your slides for items 6D, E, and F, we can go back to D. And at this time, this is an item that's open for public comment. If anyone in the audience would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I am also looking online for hands raised, and I don't see any. So,
Pro
Council,
Tem.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes, thank you. In regards to the property tax, first of all, thank you very much to staff for very diligent work. I know preparing the budget very, very hard. Complex process. I very much respect the effort that's gone into the budget process. But for the property tax increase, I am going to be voting no. And my reason is not for any other reason than a commitment that I made publicly last year. I voted in favor of the increase, and I did so with a very clear promise that I would not support another increase unless we as a council first took a serious line-by-line look at our existing expenses to find savings and ensure that we couldn't fund our priorities with the money that we already have. Now, also, we weren't very involved in the budgeting process, so that was difficult. But I can't make a promise and then go back on it. So this year, I'm going to be voting no on that one.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I am actually pretty concerned that in the budget overall, that we have not only cut staff by 9 FTE, but that we have also cut many line items through almost every department that might, I mean, I don't think we have a clear view. We up here, maybe staff has a better view, but I don't think we have a clear view as to whether that might endanger the ability of the staff that we have left to actually do the work that we are tasking them to do. If we cut training budgets, if we cut supply budgets, if we cut professional services budgets, all of which we have or staff have as they have prepared the preliminary budget, we could be in a situation where we can't get the work done because of these other line items, let alone the staff cuts that we have made. So I actually do think we council haven't done that line by line review, but staff have done some version of a line by line review that has made a lot of other cuts to the budget. If staff in preparing the preliminary budget had not cut those other lines, we would then be assumedly cutting more staff, which would, I think, make it clearer the position we were in. But the problem is, I think, adoption of the preliminary budget that we have is going to be still not a great budget for operation of the city, given those cuts and all those other line items. And certainly I would not want to handicap us further by not adopting the 1% property tax increase, which again will cover a third of the cost of inflation, the inflation that is eroding that property tax revenue that we receive. We've just got to keep up with it. It's not like running a business where you can make more sales. We don't have sales. We only have this revenue source and a couple of other revenue sources. And so the deal here is that we collect this and then we provide the service. And if we stop collecting the property tax or collect less of it, which we do every year that it is eroded by inflation, we will thus have to reduce services. And to the extent people don't want us to do that, something else has to give.
If I may, Ms. Moulton, I'm not a huge advocate of taxes generally, but in this case, I think the city, we're asking a lot of the staff for exactly the reasons you're describing. We've cut everything we can possibly cut, and then we cut some more. And this is the one thing that city council can affect is the property tax. So that's why I would advocate in this case to take the 1% increase. It's something that you can do to help on the revenue side when, staff is giving up on a lot on the expenditure side.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. And with that, I move that we adopt ordinance 5005, authorizing a 1% property tax increase for 2026 of $85,646.
Second.
Oh, we have a motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. Young. Mr. Francia, could you take the roll, please?
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hudak,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
No.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So the next two items that Mr. Hoagland discussed were for discussion only. I believe we've discussed them quite well for the moment. So we will move on to item 6G, which is Resolution 3189, Procedures for City Council Consideration of SEPA Threshold Determinations for Non-Project Appeals. This is for discussion and possible action. And welcome to the podium, Ms. Swetnam.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, members of the audience. I'm going to talk fast. I know you still have a very long comp plan discussion ahead of you tonight, but this is important and something that needs to get done in order to resolve some SEPA appeals. One SEPA appeal in particular that's already been filed with regard to the comp plan that's got to be adopted by the end of the year. So the background of this is Ordinance 4096, which was adopted in August of 2025. And that changed the code to clarify that SEPA threshold determinations for non-project actions are now heard by City Council rather than the hearing examiner. The background on that, just to remind everybody, is that the city conducts SEPA threshold review for any new action, including non-project or legislative actions. There are different types of determination of significance, non-significance, and non-project actions are those actions that are generally legislative in nature, like comprehensive plan updates or development regulations. I wanted to just remind everybody that these process changes do not apply to project actions. So no land use permits, developments, those types of things. So I'm not going to read all this, but this is the text of the procedures that was included in the resolution that was in your updated packet on Friday. I did note in red and strike through and underline a couple of grammar edits that Mr. Walters caught for us. So thank you for that. Staff is recommending that this resolution be approved so that council can proceed with making a decision on future and the current SEPA threshold determination appeal that is going to be coming to council on the comprehensive plan. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Swetnam. Council, any questions? Okay, we have none, and we have spoken about this before at least one time, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Ms. Hubick.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 3189, adopting appeal procedures for the SEPA threshold determination appeals of non-project actions pursuant to AMC 1804-250.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Hubick and a second by Mr. McDougall. Mr. Franciac, any further discussion? Mr. Franciac, will you please take the roll?
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now, the moment everyone's been waiting for, we will discuss Ordinance 5013, our 2025 Comprehensive Plan Update, and this item is for discussion. Mr. Coleman. Thank you.
Good evening, council, members of the public. My name is John Coleman. I'm the Director of Planning, Community, and Economic Development. And tonight, we've brought the comprehensive plan for the council to deliberate upon and discuss and ask questions and really dig into today. Along with this, we've of course provided the comp plan updates as proposed in the Planning Commission recommendations. We've given links to lots of background information, and we've provided an actual ordinance that can be adopted at some point when ready in the future. We are not asking for any action tonight. Tonight is hopefully going to be like a work session where you can ask questions and we can delve into the details of all of the specific items that you're interested in talking about. We also have online with us several consultants that have worked with the project. I saw Marcus Firthmakers up there. I think Bob is waiting around also, and Chris Como with Transpo, who did the transportation element. And I think Katie is also there with Makers, who worked on our climate element. And I apologize, there may be others there too. I can't see who's up there right now. So without diving into all of the changes in the comp plan, it's several hundred pages. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago when I dropped this off with the Planning Commission, so you had the opportunity to review it for the several weeks before we got to this point. The major changes are a brand new climate element, and several housing element updates. Some middle housing changes are in the development regulations, and the housing element kind of speaks to some of those, but there's fewer housing element changes than there are to development regulation changes regarding housing. We've completely rewritten the transportation element, and so there's some new features there. If you have any questions, like I said, Chris Como is available. And then our future land use amendments, which I went over with the city council to some extent. I did not invite questions. I apologize, but I think tonight we're prepared to talk, to speak to any questions you do have about those. And then, of course, city-owned parcels were added to the urban growth area. Not really much to say about that. Planning, just as a reminder, the Planning Commission reviewed the proposals and made their recommendations back on September 24th. I brought this to City Council on October 20th. So one of the things that, and speaking with individual council members, it sounded like maybe you wanted to talk about some of the specific changes that the Planning Commission made. There were 8 changes that they made, and several of those were actually guided by staff too. So as we saw that changes were necessary. So if you wanted to get into any of those, this is the list of them, and I have prepared I brought each of those 8 and have them highlighted here. If you have any questions, I can go through them. I don't really want to guide this conversation unless council wants me to. This was a time for council to start asking questions about specific things that they've gone through in their packets and had questions about, and I have received some of your questions and hopefully prepared myself enough to answer some of them. So really, this is going to be council's pleasure on how to proceed. If you want to talk about any of those 8 recommendations, we can do so. If you wanted to talk about the future land use map amendments, I also have materials on that.
Okay, council, thank you, Mr. Coleman. Initial thoughts, we could go through the recommendations one by one. How about if we start there?
All right. So recommendation number 1 was brought about by some comments that we received, that there wasn't really a specific policy in the land use element that addressed environmental policies in critical areas. And we did see that was missing, and our codes support those statements like this, but it was not in the 600 and something page draft that you already received. So we added one during the process, and the Planning Commission thought that this recommendation was a good policy to add, and staff agrees.
Great. Any questions about this? It seems self-evident to me. Council, could we get some nods on this, or
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters?
I have no problem with the statement. I think the statement is accurate. It's just somebody asked for more words to be added to the plan. And I think the Planning Commission gave in and said, okay, we'll add them. But they're self-evident. They are the law. They are the GMA. So I generally oppose adding more words for no reason.
We didn't want to be accused of our comp plan not having language supporting critical areas, so we didn't see any harm.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Walters. That is, I don't know if we like decide now or if how we do this exactly. Like, no, we don't.
We'll
Okay,
just discuss.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If council's okay with with all of these, we'll just move through and then we'll get to any of the other questions that you may have had about other things.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So policy CF 4.5, I don't know, this was a contextual question. It just seemed a little unclear. There was some concern that the way the language was written, that it said something that was not intended. And so it was easy enough for us to just, the Public Works Department just deleted this. This was language that they had put in trying to support the system that we have. But there was some confusion and it seemed like it was causing more fuss than necessary. So we just deleted it and left it as the policy has been from stood in the past, with a minor exception that we changed funds to changed money to funds. That change would stay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I don't have a problem with the strike through, but what I think could have been conveyed here, and maybe is elsewhere, maybe you can point it out if it already exists elsewhere, is that especially when we're talking about infill development, there might be some big project that needs to occur to support infill that is much larger than an individual project could ever afford. And I do think that there should be a recognition that the city is going to have to do those projects and then recoup the cost of those projects, charge development, the cost of development through latecomers agreements or other mechanisms. But I think that there's frequently going to be the case where a traditional latecomer agreement arrangement doesn't work, where somebody big does who can afford to do a project does a project, and then the city recoups the money for that developer. I think that there's going to be little projects, the backyard cottage that can't be built because of some stormwater constraint. And the solution to the stormwater constraint is some $1.5 million project downstream that also benefits the whole basin, but isn't anything that ever gets built at all unless the city does it. Do we have any kind of language elsewhere in the plan that address that scenario? Because that's one that I feel like it has come up time and again.
Libby's going to look. This is out of the capital
And this
facilities
is not
element.
not our only bite at this. So yeah, if we want to follow up later, that'd be great. But I do think that's an important concept, and it'd be great to have it memorialized in the plan.
Unfortunately, the Public Works Director is no longer with the city and he did these edits. So he might have known better, but maybe I can send him a text. He's probably watching. No, he's not, I'm sure.
We'll find it one way or another.
Should I move along to the next one then? So in the environment and conservation element, this is a pretty simple one. We had previously deleted tsunamis and was asked to leave it in, so we left it in. Is that how that worked?
Okay.
Another environment and conservation portion, there were some maps that were a PDF and the resolution was poor, so we'll get better maps put in there.
Great. Thank you.
This one probably deserves a read. Not because it's tricky content or controversial, but because there's a lot here. I'm not sure if Libby has any background on this one in particular. The habitats of local importance within the fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. This feels like it's largely just text.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Libby Grage, Planning Manager. Yes, so this one was in response to public comments. And staff agreed that the way that it was written made it sound as though the ACFL was really the main, the city was going to do everything to protect the ACFL, and maybe the other critical areas remaining throughout town outside of the ACFL were not as important or needing protection. And so we just tried to update this language to convey that ACFL needs protection, but also we're required to have regulations that protect critical areas outside of the ACFL under the Growth Management Act. So that's the background there.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I think this one is worthy of a little bit of a story. One of the first times I was a guest in this room, I was testifying to the Anacortes City Council sometime in the 90s. All of us up here, I think we're wearing leather jackets and older than I think you see the general age here. And we were talking about the critical areas ordinance. And out of that discussion came the prior version of the critical areas ordinance that the city used to have prior to when we most recently updated it. And in that document, there was this long narrative about how, yeah, we have to do critical areas protections, but we have the ACFL, and kind of the subtext was, isn't that enough? We have the ACFL, leave us alone, don't make us do other things. And we got rid of that because that's not the point of critical areas regs. So somehow I'm glad to see we're coming full circle here and articulating up front that we are trying to protect critical areas throughout the city. But the city doesn't have a great history, 15 or 20 years ago of doing that. So I'm pretty proud of where we are now. And to the extent this language helps reinforce that, I'm good with it.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the context. Change number 6, we added maintain and in appropriate cases. So you can see lots of these changes are fairly minor.
So for this one, I mean, it almost seems like obvious without those words, like, well, I'm not sure why that's added. Like, because why would we do it in inappropriate cases? Somehow I'm missing something here.
It was a little bit of detail. I think they were trying to avoid the idea that we would go out and just start acquiring a network of open spaces without purpose, or where it wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay.
Well, that was clear.
Okay, there was another thing that I read in the comp plan, and it was something about, I wrote it, sorry, I don't have it, but it was it was another one of these that said when appropriate or, when feasible. And to me, that's like, I still don't get it. Like, we're not going to do it if it's infeasible, but are we worried that we're going to do it if it's inappropriate? I don't know. I just think this doesn't strike me. I mean, I'm not going to get in a big battle over it, but I just don't really get it.
Well, the planning commission wanted to make sure that, we were holding ourselves to the highest standard, and you can tell they put a lot of work into it, where the detail that they put in was, maybe, some people may think that it's unnecessary to add this language. But they felt that the nuances warranted it.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Ms. Hebe.
I have an inkling that maintain is probably the more important word here beyond appropriate cases, because I imagine someone being concerned about acquisition of open spaces and then a road half finished, like literally just a road or a trail to nowhere. So again, making sure that we're being fiscally responsible with the money that we have to purchase land and maintain it, I think.
Thank you.
Shall I move on? All right. The recommendation number 7 was to add a glossary. We didn't have that available at the beginning of the process, but we did have a glossary at the end of the process. That is included as attachment B to the Planning Commission recommendations. So they're out there for you to see. And we didn't have any comments about the definitions in that glossary. And then recommendation number 8, there was
sorry.
Mr. Walters?
With respect to the glossary, I think a glossary is a good idea. However, a couple of the defined terms in there are like ordinary defined terms like assets, which then get kind of a more specific definition. Similarly, maybe displacement, a couple of others. So I think it would be worthwhile for staff to read through and see if there are any terms in there that are defined more narrowly than they are used elsewhere in the plan. You know, a lot of them are really straightforward: climate stressor, commute trip reduction. They're specific terms and they mean specific things, but then stuff like assets, I'm not sure should really be defined, because probably in some section other than the climate section, they're defined to mean something else, or they're used to mean something else. Exposure, there are a couple like that. So
in the glossary, does it say like specific to this specific sections, or just the comp
they
in
don't,
general?
but that would be one way to fix it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought at first that this was all climate specific. A lot of it seems to be, but maybe not all of it. So yeah, I would not wholesale include this without looking through it and seeing if it really does make sense.
Okay, so we'll take another look at the glossary. And then one thing that they found towards the end of the process was that there was mention of a list of animal species occurring in Anacortes. And there wasn't actually a list. So we're compiling a list, and that'll be, just factually based, what animals exist in Anacortes. So again, shouldn't be too controversial.
Are you going to generate that list for us so that we can debate it and examine it at length prior to adoption?
So we have, so that is one thing that we still need to get to you, and we still need to get to you a tree canopy map. It's a required element, but we've been asking, Libby has been asking around, and I won't say pestering, but asking Commerce many times if they had guidance, and they ultimately have come back and said, no, we have no guidance. So we're a little rudderless on that topic. So we're inclined to have a map and a short narrative just to make sure that we're meeting the requirement of the code. We also have in other parts of other plans within the city, we address tree canopy cover. So we're covering it in many ways, and we're just making sure that we're consistent with I believe it's a stormwater map that talks about tree canopy cover, and some parks and rec and forest plan information that also talks about that. So we just want to make sure it's all similar. So that's going to have to come back to you as well as this animal species. And what we were anticipating is, after our conversation today, that there would potentially be things that the city council wanted to see changed. We could then generate those and bring those to the city council at the next available opportunity, which right now might be the 17th, might be we were planning on the 24th, but depending on timing, if we need to bring something on the 17th, we'll see if we can. It's probably impossible at this point because tomorrow is a holiday, so probably the 24th. We'll stick with that. And then if necessary, depending on what we bring, we'll need to have a comment period with that. So we need to get that out there too, and want to do that sooner than later. So we're not causing it, creating such a delay that the city council doesn't have time to act on the comprehensive plan and development regulations before the end of the year.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I have a list of things, most of which are not substantive and not worthy of discussion here. Some of which are minor and probably not worthy of discussion here, but a couple of which I thought I would bring up right now. And this is my list from a partial review of the document. But one that several people in one neighborhood have raised to a couple of us is transportation policy 1.9. There's a subsection D, which says that we should provide an alternate route or routes for local and emergency traffic between the west end of town, Skyline area, and downtown Anacortes, in parentheses, Island Hospital. I think downtown is more than just Island Hospital, but whatever. And then it says, such as West 2nd Street. And so the people that live adjacent to the unbuilt West 2nd Street are concerned about opening up West 2nd Street. But also, I think that the big concern is, which one we have recognized over time, is but maybe just haven't written down, is that we need to avoid the creation of an alternative commute route for ferry traffic when we do anything with streets in the west numbered streets. So I would suggest that we alter that policy, maybe to delete West 2nd Street. But I also think that in that policy, we need to somehow recognize that the neighborhood rightly fears creation of a alternative commute route through there. And that's not something we want to enable.
So this was a topic of conversation at the Planning Commission, and opening West 2nd was not an intent at all. And at this point, I might invite Chris Como to potentially weigh in. Chris, did you hear that remark about is that policy 1.9?
Yeah, I heard the comment, and I agree with what John Coleman just said. It came up at the Planning Commission meeting. This is a policy that's a remnant of the 2016, the existing comp plan. It's in there. And we had actually made a recommendation or talked at one point about eliminating this. Agree with everything that Councilman Walters just said. There's problems. There may be good intent here, but there's potentially unintended consequences in terms of having a street improved so that it can carry emergency traffic is going to open it up to all sorts of other things. I don't think that's really what people intended. I think maybe there was some concern at some point that somehow emergency medical responders weren't going to be able to get somewhere in time, but I think everything that Councilman Walters just brought up is very legitimate, and something should be done to either strike it or alter the language so that it doesn't have that effect. I'm not quite sure what the concern about emergency response is in this area. The street in question is parallel and very close to Highway 20. I'm not quite sure what advantage might be gained by improving a street like that.
I don't know if it was because like if a tree fell on it or if there's a big accident or something like that, that was, in some way it was blocked by something. But I mean, I agree with Mr. Walters and with you, Mr. Como. I'd be happy to strike it, actually.
Councilman Walters, did you have a precise text amendment that you'd like us to bring back, or did you want us to work on that?
I don't have a precise amendment. I mean, striking it is one option. However, even if we strike it, I think the neighborhood would probably still prefer that we also have some language about being careful about creating alternative ferry routes. Well, not ferry routes, ferry traffic, commute routes. But that would require generating a whole new policy. Obviously, there are other routes that one can take to get to downtown or Island Hospital. So I agree with Mr. Como. It doesn't really seem like it's critical that we have a route through West Second or somewhere else. But the ferry traffic issue is a real issue that I think that it'd be worth addressing.
Yeah, and it was not staff's intent to say we needed to create a second route available for ferry traffic to parallel, from the west side to the east side. That I can assure you. So if we strike that, and Chris and our team will look at alternatives, but it seems like striking is probably the easiest and least confusing way to go about this. Were there any other specific items that the council wanted to talk about? Well, we're getting going here.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have one, but I'm navigating to it.
Okay. Well, there were a couple of things that were docket requests that popped out at me. One of them is on page 803 of our packet, but it's page 21 of 111 of, let's see. Whoops. Sorry, Ryan might beat me on this. Whoever gets there first.
Where are we going?
Okay, it's about, so page 803 of our packet. It's request to permit self-service storage in the industrial zone. And there's a note saying self-service storage should likely be avoided since it is a more residential commercial activity with very low job density. And I would
Moved on to.
Oh, whoops. Oh my gosh, you guys, sorry. That's development regulations. Sorry, I take it back.
Okay.
Sorry for the distraction.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
Goal U9, which is on page 108 of volume 1 of the comp plan, is one that I submitted during the docketing process in 2021, I think. And the goal, which was recommended by the Planning Commission, was to increase recycling and composting to 65% of the municipal solid waste stream. We've already separately adopted that goal as part of the countywide comprehensive solid waste management plan. So that's not really controversial. But U9.1, a policy underneath that goal, is to provide weekly curbside food waste collection, including small containers for residents that do not require yard waste bins. And back in 2021, I really wanted to start a conversation around this. But that didn't happen for whatever. Like, we didn't process amendments in 2021. I think there was a pandemic of some kind going on, and then it didn't get picked up in 2022 or 2023. So I'm not sure how much conversation actually went into this, but if the policy says we must do this, I think we need to have some feedback from the solid waste Division of Public Works about whether we think we can. There are some other things in that section too about performing a waste characterization study and constructing the solid waste rate schedules, the rate, the cost of providing solid waste to incentivize increased diversion or reduced frequency of pickup. I just thought we would want to be careful that this is actually what we want to do, because it's maybe something that didn't get very much conversation. Unless somebody could tell me it did get a lot of conversation and we thoughtfully did it.
Right. So I've now got this up so I can navigate to any of the specific policies that we go to.
So for you, policy U 9.3, perform the waste characterization study, analyze results to target reduction through producer responsibility or consumer education. I mean, that seems to tie in with the statewide extended producer responsibility legislation that's been passed that will be really effective, become effective in 2030. I feel like that information is known at the state level from waste characterization studies that the Department of Ecology has done over the years. And organic waste is one of those, hence the new organics management laws. So I don't know how necessary this one is, because as a state, we're very much moving in that direction already.
We were ahead of ourselves in 2021, weren't we? The state has now caught up.
Yeah, so I mean, consumer education is always good. We can't do enough of that, really.
So I'm hearing those are okay.
I think that most of those policies are maybe general enough that we can kind of do some of it or less of it. But that first one that says provide small containers for residents, I would like us to see us do that. But I also don't know for sure that it will be achievable, because we've got to do that through a contractor. We have to do an RFP, you know, so adding some words that would indicate, you know, if feasible,
Mayor Pro Tem.
if appropriate, something like that might be helpful.
Ms. Hube.
Well, we had a very similar discussion not too long ago when Waste Management was here talking about just pickups in general. And I think that adding something very simplistic, like, saying something like providing an opportunity for, I don't know, a communal organics location, because like the co-op up in Bellingham has a place for people to just drop their compost if they live in town. And Bellingham's gone really, really hard on everybody being required to have their yard waste bins. And when I was working at the state, we would get phone calls on a weekly basis. And I know that I've seen some emails from people here. They live one person to a household and they don't generate that much trash. I've actually just been paying attention to what I generate. I generate a 4-gallon trash bag every week. I don't need to get my garbage picked up on a weekly basis. Most of my stuff goes into recycling and compost. And I think like Ms. Molson said, education's paramount, because it comes down to convenience. It's not that hard to take your stuff to a compost bin if you put your compost bin next to your vehicle and you leave your house twice a week. Like this was one thing that when I saw it in here, I was so excited. So like, thanks for making the effort to put this in here. But yeah, it needs just like a little bit more refinement to actually make it feasible over the next several years.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
And one of the big objectives here was to provide some financial incentive for people to do that. You know, like if you're not filling a garbage can, let's quit charging you for it. But also quit running the truck, if you're not picking it up. But probably some additional vagueness in these policies would be helpful to articulate the vision without boxing us in too much.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Young?
No, just I think I totally agree with the sentiment, the idea, the thought, the goal. I really do. I think though, in part of this hope that we want, of what we want to see, I think it's imperative that we as a state also begin to do the analysis of, what kind of packaging we're going to allow. In my house, we're foodies. We love food. And at the end of the day, we are also recyclers. But at the end of the day with that, the packaging that we have to choose from doesn't always give us that option. And so what, you may have heard me before in other years talking to the packaging industry to say, oh, it looks good, it sounds good, and it's something we should do and need to do urgently. But at the end of the day, we have to have rules in place that allows certain types of packaging such that, we can, as consumers, do the right thing by, purchasing those items and packaging that actually is recyclable, even though many of them have numbers on the back that sort of suggest that they are, but they really aren't. So, I would love if we could somehow do it a little bit different. Last thing is that in Victoria, BC, I was up there not that long ago, and they had a different type of bag that they were using. And those are small things, but every bit goes toward preventing the microplastics and the single-use plastic things that we've attempted to do as a society. But I just thought it was important to say that. But I truly do appreciate the work that's being done here in the state in order to try to minimize what's going to the landfill, and we have to begin somewhere. So, thank you.
Okay, so where are we we went through all the recommendations, right? Planning Commission, and now we're just still kind of delving through the document.
So I'm not hearing that council had anything that they had already come up with that they saw major changes that they wanted done. I'm not saying, I want to respect your ability to still work on this and still do that. I'm also trying to balance, if we start doing public notice periods for, changes that are substantive to what we have in front of us, we'd like to get that started sooner than later. So I don't really know how to manage that right now. I feel like I might be jumping the gun if we start publishing the changes, or do you think the staff should start publishing the changes that we already know that we need to have?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Walters?
I tend to think that what would be most useful for the public is for us to provide them with one more comment opportunity on both the comp plan and the development regulations at the same time, with any changes that we want to make to both of those documents. So I would say don't advertise that yet, because we haven't even started going through the development regulations.
Well, they're up next.
We will confirm about that.
We do have some expert witnesses with us here tonight too. So if you had anything that you were that was part of the development regulations where you felt like you might want to take advantage of Katie or Marcus or Chris's presence, that I don't want to push you into jumping into the development regulations tonight, but we have an opportunity.
So we did receive a comment from Jimmy Blaze of MJB. And there were questions about the setbacks.
And that's under the development regulations.
Right. So looking around at council, are we good with
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Walters?
If we're not going to have, are we not going to have these consultants at future meetings?
We can. We have to check budgets, but
Sure. Would it be worth talking about that one evidently high priority item in the development regulations now with the benefit of the consultants?
I think that it would. Yes. I'm seeing nods. Let's talk about that.
all right. So we're moving into next item on the agenda then.
Yes.
Okay. So I have another slide presentation for that just in case. Did you want staff to provide any words before we just jump right into your comments about development regulation questions?
On how long we're going to be here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking as far as time goes, we're coming up on 9 o'clock. Do we feel like we have another 20 minutes in us, council? I'm seeing some fairly enthusiastic nods. Okay, let's give ourselves 20 minutes and see where we are. As far as words, Mr. Coleman, did you want to give a brief overview of the comments we received as a lead-in?
We haven't received, the comment period for this officially closed.
Sorry, the MJB letter that we received.
Oh, okay. That was sent to your emails. Was that sent to staff? I do not have a slide
Okay.
with that.
So, okay, I have it in front of me. So basically the question is, MJB proposed clarifying the setback requirements for portions of buildings above the maximum base height in the MMU and CBD zones, because it's a little bit confusing as written.
Did you want to jump in on that? I'm slowly bringing that up if you. Page that up.
All right, so I can give a little bit of background on this. If I can jump to, oh dear.
It looks like it's section 19.420.120C7.
I'm sorry about the scrolling, and I'm just gonna have to do it.
Looks
All
like
right.
you're there. Thank you, Libby.
So, yeah, just for a little bit of background on this one, this code provision is in the section of the municipal code relating to building height calculations, exceptions, and modifications. And it is where did I lost it?
C7, there we
C7.
are.
Thank you so much. So C7, so this is a modification to building heights. It's a special standard that applies to buildings within the central business district and the marine mixed use zone. And it requires that for buildings that exceed the maximum base height in CBD and marine mixed use, buildings must incorporate horizontal setback of 8 feet along at least 75% of the building facade. And so this applies to buildings in CBD and marine mixed use that go above the base height. The base height in CBD is, I think, 50 feet. And in marine mixed use, it's 45, I want to say, but there's an opportunity to go to 65 feet in both of those zones through application of bonus incentives. So anyways, so that's kind of the background, and we received comments on this one about it's a little bit confusing the way that it reads, and staff agrees with that. The graphic doesn't exactly match the text. And so Mr. Blaze provided comments to you requesting that we look at making clarifications. And I think that Mr. Marcus Johnson is able to answer questions about this, but really the intent of the requirement is to for taller buildings along the street to provide some setback for light to come through and avoid the tunnel effect. So this was something that was added in 2019 with the development regulations when that additional building height was added into the code.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Hewick.
I just need a really quick clarification. Isn't a balcony considered a setback? Can't a balcony be a setback?
So this is referring to, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand.
Well,
the
part
question.
of what the letter said was there was concern around loss of square footage, usable square footage. And just when I look at this picture, I'm like, oh, that's a balcony. That's outdoor square footage. That's outdoor living space.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, that was just immediately where I went. I was like, well, couldn't you just make a building with a balcony as part of your setback? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
certainly if somebody were to, do what's shown in this photo here, yeah, that could be some rooftop deck, open space or something like that. Yeah, so it could be usable for sure.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I think at a minimum here, we need some change in the graphic because the graphic seems to be showing this setback at the top floor, but then the words in the graphic say that you have to do it lower than that. Apparently, you can't do it on the top floor, according to the words.
I think the intent is that the step back must begin at some point above the ceiling of the ground floor and the top floor. So it can occur anywhere within that range.
So if you can go all the way to the ceiling of the top floor, then it seems like that bracket should also go all the way up to the top floor.
Yep.
And then I don't think it should show the step back at the top if it's actually 75% vertically. I mean, so it's a little unclear to me even what the 75% means. Does it mean 75% of the width of the building facing the street must come back 8 feet? Because if so, I don't really think that makes sense. I'd like to hear from Marcus or whoever can address it, but I am concerned principally about number one, how much it will cost to construct something with all this modulation that apparently is envisioned here, and two, about clarity, and then three, about equity. So if you are building a building that is below the base height limit, so say it's 4 stories or whatever, then you have no requirement to do a step back. If you add 1 story and that now exceeds the base because you're getting the bonus provision, all of a sudden, all of that first 4 stories needs to then, or the 3 stories between story 1 and story 5, then need to be modulated 75%. That doesn't, first of all, that doesn't seem equitable between those 2 hypothetical buildings. But also you're losing a lot of units. You're creating a lot more expense to actually construct the building. And finally, we need to pick a word, setback or step back, but not use both.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cleland McGrath, did you have something to add?
I can wait until we hear from Marcus.
Okay.
Okay. All great points, and I'm going to do my best to kind of fill in here since I wasn't there in 2019 when some of this was written. And Bob had to go put his daughter down for to go to bed type of time. So, but yes, so I think the picture is more is generally more illustrative of what the intent of the code parameters are supposed to or intended to do. And so I do think the kind of comment about whether we need to pick a term, I think the code text should probably be updated to step back rather than setback for this particular feature, since it is it's talking about stepping back a portion of the building, and it can happen at the other feature there is it's intended to happen to give the developer or builder choice of any floor above the ground floor. So it's not saying it needs to be on the 6th floor, it needs to be on the 5th floor, whatever the case is. It's saying that, or the intention is with the width of the building along the street facing facade, so horizontal, there needs to be a 75% of that horizontal facade facing the street on, let's say, the 5th floor needs to have a vertical step back that is at least 8 feet to kind of provide for that basically visual interest slash lighting light and air that comes through slash open space, outdoor deck space potentially is what's going there. So I think that's the intention of that, and we seeing the comments from MJB does bring up opportunities to clarify the text or to clarify and clarify the graphics itself to make this a more clear distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And so are we saying then it's just one floor? It's not the entire thing? Is that correct?
Correct.
That's how I always read it, starting in 2019, that it was just the one floor.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can come up with clarifying language for that.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And if we change it from step to setback, then it won't be read as you're stepping the whole building back. So it's not a vertical, it's kind of trying to get to a horizontal modulation, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Thank you. So I was there in 2019 on Planning Commission, and it's pretty vague. I wish we had Dawn here right now. But my kind of hazy memory is that the 75% was because you would have the 4th wall be along an alleyway. So you've got kind of some options of doing that 75% around the three sides that would be either facing a street or facing a walking path or whatnot, so that it, for human scale, it was attractive. I also agree that the intention, while not being the greatest visual, is that, yeah, the architect and the developer gets to choose when that setback happens, anywhere from above the ground floor to the top floor, with at least one setback. I think there was a lot of debate on that in 2019. Libby was here. Right? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of us
It's
were
kind
here.
of a blur.
Anyway, so I understand how it needs some clarifications, but I can understand how someone trying to design a building wants to have those that clarity before they start designing it, right? And coming back to the planning department. But I don't think we should punish development that wants to have, or a developer that wants to have use that bonus height incentive to have to set back the entire building above the ground floor, 8 feet. That doesn't make any sense, but to have some variation is important. That's all.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Walters.
I think that as written, it wouldn't allow for that step back to go around the alley side. No? What? Because facade doesn't mean, it means the street side, but
It could, but I think, wasn't the 75% supposed to be on the 3 sides? Of the
I don't
building?
recall that. I could be wrong, but the facade is a defined term in the code, and it talks about the street facing facade. So it's only one side of the building that has to meet this requirement.
so I like the idea of the step back at the top level because it, I think, assists with the apparent height of the building, reducing the apparent height, maybe creates more opportunity for a daylight plane through there. I don't understand why anyone would ever choose to put the step back at any other floor other than the top one. But if it is only one floor and they have the choice of doing the top one, I think that that's great. But it needs to be clear that it's only one floor that has to have that step back.
So yes, this graphic makes it look like it can be on the top, but the words make it sound like it has to be between the ground floor and the top floor. So that needs to be clarified. As far as doing it on a different floor, maybe you want a really nice covered space patio when you're on the 3rd floor. I don't know. It can be left up to the people who are designing it, certainly not us. Mr. McDougall?
Getting tired. Just replace must with can.
And then would we want it could include the top floor though, right? So must be placed above the ground floor.
I think if the council is comfortable with the clarification that the stepped back portion is 75% of one floor along the street facing facade, and that it can be placed anywhere between the top of the ground floor and the top of the top floor or the top floor. We can bring back language that would make that clear and update the graphic to make it clear for everybody.
Council, are we feeling nodding? Okay, great. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Grange.
Thanks, Marcus.
Okay, taking the temperature of the room here. I think everyone's looking like they might be ready to wrap it up for tonight and talk about this more very soon. Okay. Okay, anything else for the good of the order, council? Okay, well, thanks. It's great to have everyone here in person, and thank you to staff and anyone who's watching, and this meeting is now adjourned.